Regular meeting at this time of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. To quote Vice Chairman Don Martin before we started the meeting, we're all in our places with sunshiny faces, ready to attack a new day. Doesn't that sound good?
Except I didn't say that, but that's great. I like it.
We had a good meeting yesterday, and before the meeting started, a lot of what I've been noticing today is how we've been acting before the meeting starts. It was very busy yesterday, but Commissioner Whisenhunt, who is at my far left, she's been the happiest person I've seen all day long. All she's done accidentally is bump into people, didn't see them coming.
We're coughing.
Or talking. So she's ready for the meeting as well. We have an interesting agenda, to say the least, and the county manager is here. And I'm going to ask the county manager if he would brief the agenda that we're going to deal with. And I would also mention that the sheriff of Forsyth County will be here momentarily. Commissioner Whisenhunt, you may be interested in knowing that Commissioner Ted Kaplan asked the question, is he referred to as the high sheriff? And if so, why do you call him high? Or is he just the sheriff? And I said, well, why don't you ask him? He says, you're not going to get me to ask him that question. So, but those of you in the audience, and by the way, this is being televised live on Channel 13. Maybe we can get the sheriff to respond to that question. But right now, let's turn the meeting over to our High County Manager, Dudley Watts.
I am not the High County Manager, by the way, but anyway. So what we hope to do today is really follow back up from information that we needed to get back to you. So basically what we have is we've got follow-up items from the detailed work session. We've got some items from the public hearing to follow back up. And then we'll dive kind of into the status of the recommended budget because, as you know, there have been a few modifications, and we just want to make sure that you're sort of on the same page with that. I had Sheriff Kimbrough coming in as item 4, but I think the chairman's kind of indicated if Sheriff comes in, he'll give the floor to him at that point. And then obviously left over from the work we did last Thursday is the review of the ASL request, and we can kind of step through there. And then we really go into an open discussion and really begin the process of trying to see where there are some areas of interest kind of across the board as far as what looks like a final budget. And so the other thing that I just want to mention is we do have all our budget staff up on the first row. We didn't have the table this year, really just thinking still around COVID, although they're sitting very closely together. But you've got Christopher Ong there on your far right, and Phyllis Russell, Kimberly Busey, Janet Hillenbrand, and Ian Bumgarner. I did that pretty well, just thinking about a zillion things. But anyway, so that, they all have their assigned departments, and they really are prepared to dive into the details as far as whatever you need. But so we've got all those resources there. We've got some county staff there, and then we also have invited really county staff and leadership to listen in on the session. So anyway, we've got the resources here for you if you've got any questions, and obviously we've got a couple days to get this work done. So with that, let me go ahead and dive into the follow-up items from the detailed work session, and I'll just turn it over to Kyle. Kyle, you want to come up and talk about what they have in front of them, and then we can deal with any questions that are out there on that.
Good morning, Commissioners. As Dudley said, after the detailed work session, there were a few things that we had. There were some requests, anyways, to get some additional information, and so just wanted to kind of walk through that. I've handed y'all a packet of just some supplemental information, and so after the agenda, the first thing you should see is a map, and it is a map of. You want me to put it on the Elmo or just walk through it? Or?
Yeah, just dive into it. Yeah,
So first one is a map of Forsyth County employees by address. And so you can see the majority of employees do live within the county, but there are a smattering of employees who live outside of the county. I can't remember, but that was a request from a commissioner on Thursday.
And I do think that's interesting because we do have, they are, I mean, almost the whole map's covered up, and they are from all areas of the county, and you would, as you'd expect, they would, you'd have folks kind of living close to where they work.
The next two documents in that packet is some information related to some schools and some schools comparison. I will say that we sent the school system an email, I believe it was Friday, probably Friday morning, Friday, or maybe early afternoon, with a bunch of questions that came out of Thursday's meeting. And they will be here tomorrow, at the workshop tomorrow, to discuss that some more. Really, the first part that you have there, it's just looking at 2018 and 2019 data. And really, this was some information that I'd pulled that I think we had provided before, but it didn't have Durham or Guilford or Mecklenburg or Wake on it. It was really just it was Forsyth and the surrounding counties of Forsyth. And so that's just some third grade reading scores from 2019 and 2018, what the local current expense is, and then the dropout rate. So that's what that is. And then the other document is basically shows the source of funding from, this is 2020 data. And so you can see the source of funding from the state and from federal and from local for each of these education units as well. And so I'll give that for your consideration. And again, the schools will be here tomorrow to address a bunch of questions that we submitted to them last week. The next map you'll see there is a map of the qualified census tracts in Forsyth County. And this will play into our discussion later on American Rescue Plan funding. But it's a map for you of the qualified census tracts. And then the next map is a map of juvenile detentions. Well, it's where juvenile detention centers are in North Carolina. And so you can see that they are, I believe it's 12 juvenile detention centers across the state. So, and what we've got below that is the number of youth this year and the number of bed days this year from July 1st through, this is through April. This is through April. So 10 months of data for the current fiscal year. And so you can see how many youth and how many bed days have been spent in each of these facilities. There are, I guess, 4 facilities where there have been no placements, and then 2 with 1 with 3, and then the other ones are a little bit more heavily used, which really it's Alexander, Guilford. Alexander and Guilford are probably the highest used, with Madison and Mecklenburg right there as well. So that's.
And Kyle, my recollection is that average, that 45.6 day average length of stay is about twice what it normally is.
That's correct. Yes, that's absolutely right.
So, yes. So the COVID impact of that has really doubled that number.
And then the next thing I will say, it's not on your agenda, but we did want to add in an alternate service level for the citizen survey. And so we kind of talked about that at the detailed presentation. And I was talking to Dudley, and I said, we don't have an alternate service level for that. So I know there was a lot of interest, and obviously the board actually funded this in the December restorations. But we have not entered into a contract with anybody, and so we wanted to put this back out there as an alternate service level. I know that there's been an interest expressed with that, and so that's just kind of added for your consideration. And that's really the follow-up from the detailed work session. Do you want me to go into the public hearing items, or?
Let's, excuse me, let's hold off because the sheriff did show up, Mr. Chairman, so if you wanted to go ahead and do that, unless there are any questions about these items.
Well, one question on the juvenile detention cases.
Yes.
Durham has, there's a big outlier. There's one child with 288 days.
Yes.
I mean, all the rest of these are pretty average, and just like the average is 45, and these others, whoa, what's that? How could that happen?
I don't know what the situation is, but it's actually more than that because that's just FY '21. That same juvenile has been at the, he was like, he or she, I'm not sure. That juvenile was at that center even before that. I don't know the details of the case, but that juvenile has been at that facility for a very long time.
We can attempt to get that. Stan Clarkson had actually provided us some information with some details around that we'll make sure we share with you. I don't know if that case was on the information that Stan had sent, Chantel.
I think it is, Mr. Manager. I just need 5 minutes to pull it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, the last question on that is how to make a projection for next year. I mean, that's kind of a, obviously, everything's not going to become unclogged in the court system overnight. Sure. So the question kind of becomes, because I know we budgeted for a lot more days.
We sure did. The budget the number in the FY '22 budget is really based on the FY '21 situation that we're in, where we have gone well over what we had budgeted this year. And so, that's a difficult question as far as what's going to happen once the courts reopen, and how quickly will these be adjudicated to help our juveniles be released.
Thanks.
Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I wanted to just make a comment about the mapping for addressing the employees. Back in 2018, this number was relatively low, but it looks like it has increased now, so I'm glad to see that bit of work has been done. And as far as the census tract is concerned, just for public knowledge, I had looked at that mapping when you expanded it, and I did show that the particular area over on Indiana Avenue was in that census tract. So thank you for the mapping. That's all I have.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question, please.
Yes, sir, go right
Just
ahead.
30 seconds only. That's why I've been advised by Commissioner Kaplan to keep my questions so limited. On the juvenile detention centers map you have, Carl, could you glean any impact of the state mandated race age on the number of beds that we actually need going forward? Or are you still sort of looking at the data?
I mean, I do think that raise the age has certainly impacted that for sure. Between raise the age and the pandemic, I think those are those two situations are certainly impacting the length of stay, I think, and the number of.
They happened about the same
It
time,
really
so it's
did.
going to be a little hard to.
Raise the age went into
tease
effect
out.
December of 19, I believe. December 1st, 2019, I think is when it went into effect, and then obviously the pandemic hit in March. So.
And Mr. Manager, the case with Durham County, that particular youth has been in detention since July 2019. The delay is primarily was transferred to Superior Court, and so with court not being in session, that's just exacerbated the issue. I don't know all of the other details around it, but that youth has been in detention for almost 2 years.
And most of those long length of stay issues were related to transfers to Superior Court, if I remember correctly. And so you've got a fairly significant charge, I would suggest, in those.
Commissioner, some pause. Thank you very much for this report. We're going to pause now and ask the sheriff of Forsyth County, Bobby Kimbrough, if he could come forward and give us some conversation. And as you come up, Sheriff Kimbrough, guys, I'm going to go ahead and settle the matter if I can, but I'm not sure we can do that. I was talking to Commissioner Ted Kaplan just before the meeting started, and he looked at me and he said, do you call Sheriff Kimbrough the high sheriff, or do we call him just the sheriff? And if we do call him the high sheriff, why do we call him that? And I said, well, he'll be here in a few minutes. I don't mean to surprise you on this, but I don't have the answer either, other than it probably is a sign of respect for the sheriff's office. What do you think?
Sir, just the fact that you all allowing me to be here shows me respect. If you call me Bobby Kimbrough, that's significant to me. The sheriff is sufficient to me. It doesn't matter what you call me. That's a personal choice. It doesn't matter, Commissioner Kaplan, Bobby, Sheriff, it doesn't matter to me.
I found out, it's okay.
He's comfortable. We're glad you're
Where
here.
this came from, Sheriff, in Raleigh, when the Wake County Sheriff would show up, everybody'd say, oh, the High Sheriff of Wake is here. But the High Sheriff, I looked it up on my little encyclopedia here, and the High Sheriff is in England, actually comes down from all those years. So in Britain, Wales, and Ireland, he's called the High Sheriff. I don't know how Scotland got left out. That's the way that is. So thank you.
No, thank you, sir.
You're my High Sheriff.
Now, that's an accomplishment right there.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes,
First
sir.
of all, I want to say good morning to all of you all, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share with you some of my thoughts. I want to give a special thanks to you, Mr. Watts, your staff, Kyle, and all of your assistant county managers for the energy that you put into this budget request. Some of the things that I just wanted to address is that I'm grateful for the support that you all have given me over the last couple of years. As we go forward, I just wanted to bring to your attention some of the areas of emphasis that I would like to give close attention to in the upcoming budget. And some of those emphases in those areas are school safety. As most of you all know, you know better than I do, we have assumed most, if not all, of the schools in Forsyth County, building bridges and citizens and law enforcement. One of the things that we talked about when we first came into this space was that it was important to have community credibility. It was important for us to be relatable to the community. It was important for us to have trust in the community. And that has paid great dividends over the last couple of years. As you all know, our community credibility has stopped a lot of problems in this community, being out in the community. And so we must continue in that area. One of the other things that we've done is modernize an approach to criminal investigation, which I'll get into later. One of the things that I talked about was 21st century technology. It's a must. As much as I dislike technology every now and then as an old 59-year-old man, I'm just learning how to master my computer now. I'm just learning a lot of things that my kids know how to do and can run circles around me. But what I have realized is that technology is a must in the 21st century. And so we're utilizing that. We want to continue to be a progressive. We want to continue to be a thought leader in this space of law enforcement. And I think that with your help, we will continue to do that. One of the other things that we talk about is confronting present-day safety, security threats in the residents in Forsyth County, including substance addiction and drug trafficking. That was near and dear to my heart when I decided to enter this thing of politics because drugs touch my family personally. I have spoken about that. When we came in, we created the first Forsyth County City Drug Task Force, which the numbers are impressive of the drugs and the guns that we have taken off the streets in Forsyth County. I need your support. I need your help to continue to do the things that we're doing to make the residents of this county different, safer. Competitive compensation is a must. And I'll start with the first one. Some of the highest essential unfunded priorities: increasing telecommunicators pay or implement non-supervisor career ladder, $72,130. And I say that because when we look at, and we had this conversation several months ago, we said we don't have to look around to compare salaries or compensation. We can just use Winston as our baseline. And if we go just on that school of thought in comparison with Winston-Salem telecommunicators, $36,000 to what we're being paid our telecommunicators. I know that that doesn't seem like a lot of money, the difference is just, but the telecommunicators that answer the calls for the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office could walk across the hallway and answer calls for the fire and EMS and make more money and do less work. I think that we just celebrated telecommunicators, but yet, in my opinion, we're not competitive to what is being paid to telecommunicators around the state. The graph that we put together shows that. I think that, well, I would love for you to consider increasing that for them. They do an awesome job. They are the link between the services that the residents call for. One of the things that is near and dear to me is the Juvenile Intervention team that I would love to be a part of the Forsyth County school system this year. as most of you all are seeing the violence, the shootings, the age limits. I heard you talking about that as we were coming in, the rise of juvenile crime that is taking place in the community. I was over in Piedmont Circle yesterday, walking around with Mrs. Fry, Ms. Parham, and a few other people just walking around, looking, talking with the kids, and looking at what's going on. When school opens back up, we will have, the numbers will continue to rise. The numbers will continue to jump in terms of what is happening out here, the gun violence. When we go back into the school system, we're gonna need more personnel to adjust to what's happening on the streets. We need that juvenile intervention team. It's not a juvenile intervention team to go out here and arrest. It's to prevent some of the things that are happening in the community. We are stretched very thin right now with how we use our resources in the community. And we use our resources in the community with our deputies because I think that a lot of social issues that are happening in this community become criminal justice issues, especially with our juveniles. I know you're probably saying, well, do you have the manpower to do that? Well, I just want to sidetrack for a minute. We are working in Winston-Salem in Saturations Patrol. You've heard us talk about that Saturations Patrol. I get a lot of calls say, well, why are you working inside of Winston? Doesn't Winston-Salem Police Department do that? And here's what I say to that is that as the sheriff or the high sheriff, whatever you refer to it as an elected official by city and county residents, as city residents pay county taxes, I can't close a blind eye to the services that the people in Winston-Salem need. I can't. If they need patrol or me to saturate inside of the city, I have to help Winston-Salem. I could not help them in good conscience. And so what I'm saying is that in the times that we're living in, as we're growing, if we don't get the additional officers, it's gonna affect my response time, because I'm gonna have to, as my father would say, rob Peter to pay Paul. I'm gonna have to move people from different parts of the agencies to other parts of the agencies to compensate for the shortcoming that I don't have in other areas. What I'm finding is that when we move officers to assist in Winston-Salem, it means that I go short somewhere else. And so I would love for you to consider this juvenile intervention team, because it is a much needed unit. We don't have one currently. We don't. We do not have a juvenile intervention unit. A county this size, we need that. We find ourselves doing a lot of programming, working with in some of the high stress areas, some of the poverty-stricken areas in this community. We find ourselves doing that. So I really appreciate if you really consider that, because I need your support on the juvenile intervention unit. The other thing that when we talked about being relevant in technology, investigative services, you all saw the Arctic real-time intelligence unit that we started 2 years ago. We started that unit with the concept of trying to create a safer community. We created that by placing cameras in certain areas, common areas where there's no expectations of privacy. We're not violating anybody's rights or anything. A lot of times people say, Big Brother. Well, I can tell you, Big Brother has been watching us. If you think back to 1990, when we watched the bombs drop in the Gulf War from our living room, we saw that in real time on the TV. So what I'm saying is that the technology has been there. We have been behind in investigative services. You go to major cities, real-time intelligence exists all over the county. We went out to Minneapolis, we saw something on a larger scale. If you go to Charlotte, you see the same thing. If you go to Raleigh, you see the same thing. What I'm saying is that real-time intelligence is not something of the future. It's here and it's now. What I'm asking for is to increase the staff by 3 people. By doing that, what they would do for me, Dr. Martin, is they will give me an opportunity to have that space monitored 24/7, 365. It will give me the opportunity to where at 5 o'clock when the persons that sit in that unit now go home, we will actually have eyes on those cameras. One of the things that we're having a conversation with is that imagine that the psychological effect of assurance that it has on the residents in a community knowing that these cameras exist. The shooting that took place in one part of the county, we were able to capture the identity of the suspect. Just imagine the shooting that took place out on Louisville Clemens, right there in front of Chick-fil-A. We were able to capture what happened there. What I'm saying is that real-time intelligence is needed, and I need your support in those additional 3 personnel. The things that I'm asking for are not things, new airplane, don't want that. I'm not asking for anything for myself. What I'm asking for is things that make us safer, that make us better as a community. The other thing that I would like for you to consider is increasing the staff for permits and the gun permits. It is amazing to me to see the uptick in persons wanting gun permits and carrying concealed permits. It is mind-blowing to me that every morning when I come in, the lobby is jam-packed, to the point to where I take my jacket off and jump in and start helping move the crowd. We're averaging about 60 to 70 on a given day. Gun permits, the uptick in concealed permits and gun purchases are out of this world. I was in a gun shop on 66 the other day, Chris, and they don't even have ammunition in the shops. So people are wanting gun permits, and what that has caused is an increase on the staff inside of the gun permits unit. What it's gonna cause is a backlog on how soon you get your gun permits back, how soon you get your carry concealed. So all I'm asking for is to include that by requesting 1 office assistant. That's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for anything elaborate in that area. The other thing that I want you to consider as well is increasing field services. I kind of highlighted on that earlier, but I just want to read something to you. Based on the April 21st law enforcement study conducted by County Budget and Management, an additional 6 deputy positions was calculated as being needed in FY21 to maintain staffing levels of the county's 2008 baseline study of position per 1,000. The same study indicated 4 positions will be needed by 2025. No positions were recommended in the study. However, based on the IACP, International Association of Police Chiefs, patrolling staffs equations as used during 2017 data, the appropriate staff levels of field service division is 71. This is a deficiency of 11 positions. Throughout April of FY 2021 priority P, that means priority response. Response times have worsened 3.4% and will continue to worsen during 2021-22 if additional positions not added. If not additional added, priority response times will exceed 7 minutes in the near future. What that means is that when we came into this space, we were down deputies in patrol. I remember having a conversation and said, well, you can't ask for something that you have vacancies for. And that made a lot of sense to me. It did. But we have filled those deputies' positions. We don't have the shortage that Winston-Salem has in patrol. We don't have the shortage that Gifford County has in patrol. We don't. We have all of those numbers filled to capacity. But at the same time, this county is growing. This county is continuously growing. Services and demands are continuously increasing. What I'm saying is I need additional personnel. It went back to my earlier statement, robbing Peter to pay Paul, moving deputies from one part of a division to another part of a division to assist or to meet the needs. I need that. And the study is based on the study that this county did that stated what is needed. All I'm asking for is that if we did the study, the numbers bear out what is required. Please help me get those. This other one is we talked about matching the range of salaries for sworn personnel and detention officers. You know, we've had this conversation many times that we would try to stay equal to Winston. We have not done that. All I'm asking is that in your heart, you look at it and see, you know, what is fair, what is right. Our men and women do the same job that Winston does. The men and women of this county, they work for you. All they're wanting is equal pay for equal work. So I would like for you to please consider that. This last one, I guess I've had a lot of conversation about it. I guess a lot of times people don't understand the public relations. And what I would like to explain is that the strength of any organization is its media footprint. Because a lot of time, the first lie becomes the truth. And if you don't have the ability to speak truth, to create your own narrative that puts you behind. I'll give you an example. This is the 4th largest county in the state of North Carolina. Mecklenburg, Wake, Guilford, Forsyth. Depending on who you ask, they say Wake is first. If you ask McFadden, he say he first. If you ask Baker, he say he first. But anyway, we are 4th. And I say that to say this, is that out of 7 major counties in the state of North Carolina, this is the only county doing social unrest that didn't have a window broken, you didn't have any violence. All of those other counties did. And in our Sheriff's Association meeting, we have this conversation. And what I say the attribute to it was that having community credibility, having relationships in the community, having the ability to get out and be a part of the community. I've walked soles off of my shoes being a part of this community. But it takes a media presence. We got a lot of hits from people saying, well, why do you need a media presence? Media information is important. It is important. You know, I was having a conversation with one of my commissioners, and we were going back and forth talking, and I said, I know you probably get about 15 to 20 calls from the same people complaining about our social media. When we started this, we had about 8,000 followers. We got about 30,000. I would never weaponize social media. That's not who Bobby Kimbrough is and not who the sheriff is. We've had numerous of calls from social media that follow us and say, do we need to call? And I said, no. And I say no because you all have a lot to do besides answering the phone from 20 to 30,000 that we could say, we need your support. I would never do that because I believe you understand the power of social media. I know you do. And that is some of the complaints that you get because when social unrest starts, we have to have the ability to speak truth to the volume and the numbers of people. It is a must. Anytime you needed our social media team, a PR team, we're here for you. We are. You know, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to stand before you. But what I will tell you is that we may have different roles, but we're comrades, we're allies in the same thing that's providing better services for this community. I need you, Dr. Martin. I need you, Commissioner McDaniels. I need you, Mr. Limble. I need you, my friend, Mr. Plyler. I need you, Mr. Kaplan. I need you, Mr. Fleming Alameen. And I need you, Ms. Wisenhunt. I need all of you. I need you as well, Mr. Watts. Because what I will tell you is that it's going to get better before it gets worse. The summer is fast approaching. It is. The gun violence is through the roof. You don't have to take my word. I'm in the community every day. And what I would tell you is that I know that the numbers may seem high, but I promise you, you get what you pay for. But on the other end of that, what you don't have, you will pay for. You will. All I'm asking you is that please consider the things that I'm asking for. None of this is elaborate. You know, I want to thank Janice and all of you all for the numbers, and we crunch and we go back and forth. But as always, the final say is in your hands. I know when you look at the budget, you saw an uptick in a lot of things. A lot of it was the school system and the new contract with the new healthcare provider. So I thank you for this time. I thank you for this opportunity. And as always, I love you all. Thank you.
I don't disagree with anything you said. The bottom line in my mind is the total number of deputies we need and what the total cost is. And the third thing in my mind is I read on the front page is the place was a habit that 2 teens were convicted. That's the story on the front page of the Winston-Salem Journal of shooting and killing a 16-year-old boy. So you got 3 teenagers involved, and I can't disagree with you get what you pay for. So the bottom line with me, anyway, is when we're talking about a $503 million budget, what are we talking about where you explained this very carefully and I think cogently in terms of the bottom line figures, number of deputies and total amount?
You asking me what is the bottom line figure, Mr. Potter? What is the bottom line figure, Randy? A little under 2 million.
Okay. Any further questions from the commissioners?
I've got a couple.
Sure, go right ahead.
And I say, Sheriff, thank you for being here, and I do appreciate your priorities. I mean, the priorities, areas of emphasis, those things are good. I do want to ask a question, sort of a staff question first. Every year, we have a contract with PTRC, Piedmont Triad Regional Council. Actually, they do a market share salary study. And I am interested in knowing about particularly this, our telecommunicators issue. Is that something that appears to be out of line? The issue of several of the other items in here with their salary issues, the matching, the Winston-Salem PD issues. I'm kind of interested in sort of market share. And no offense to you, Randy, but you do your own study, and I'm kind of interested in the PTRC study and whether we include those positions in it.
And Shannon's behind you, so she can probably respond to that. And I think that part of it, both with telecommunicators and the parity question, really relates to the recommendation that we made that's in the recommended budget around elevating our target for when we are competitive. And so we've suggested going from 90 to 95% in terms of that. And Shannon can talk a little bit about how we, why that didn't get moved in that part of the recommendation.
So the telecommunicator classification was included in the PTRC study this year, and have been in other years as well. In the Piedmont area, comparison area, the telecommunicators for Forsyth County is 101% of the average market. And then for the statewide, they're at 97.2% of the average.
And what about the just general patrol officers and others? Because there's the benchmark has been set that we would try to match Winston-Salem PD. In fact, we did for a while at a fairly large cost. And I think, I don't know if it's accurate to say, and I think county manager can correct me, but it seems to me we backed away from that. Didn't back away, we just couldn't keep up with them. I think it was probably the issue, and I think part of it was based on this market share issue.
Actually, when you read the resolution that the board approved, it basically set Winston-Salem as the competitor.
Right.
And so we applied, in treating them just like every other county classification, we applied our 90% rule to that.
Right.
And so we would move it when it got 90%. Now that we moved that to 95, we would move it and achieve that parity when we got to 95. I think we're at 97% right now. And the only other factor that's there that I think we need to do a better job of sort of advertising is I think we're one of the few jurisdictions that just pays out holiday pay. And so that puts us in a position, I mean, so if we advertise, a $40,000 annual starting salary, we're actually going to pay 12 days of holiday time at 8 hours for the day. And so that's, I do this math off the top of my head, but if it's $1,000 extra, we really don't advertise that, but those are dollars that are going into the deputy's pocket. Now, they're going to work half of them, and they're going to be compensated when they work half of them, maybe at an overtime rate, depending on where they were. So I don't think you can factor in the whole amount of money as sort of additional compensation because part of it is being paid for time off, but you can certainly account for half of that. And so, you know, the sheriff's, he is fully staffed. I got to hand it to those guys. Their recruitment efforts around officers has been amazing. They've got enthusiasm there that is amazing. You know, I would argue that we are pretty competitive. And with our target at 95, we will bring recommendations to you to, if you accept that as the recommendation for what we're going to use to be competitive in the future, when we get below 95%, you'll see a request. We'll adjust it back. I think really what they're asking with the telecommunicator thing is really just to do the same thing with telecommunicators that you've done with law enforcement officers and the detention officers, because detention officers are a grade below, and so we've kept parity with detention officers, and you know, it has worked. We've been able to recruit really effectively, and so, you know, we're in a good place. Certainly see where the sheriff's coming from. My sense is that telecommunicators, it's a hard job. It is a heart-wrenching job. Because you've got, nobody calls you to tell you, 911 to tell you have a nice day. So, I mean, you're dealing with a difficult situation every time that phone rings. It, for whatever reason, is kind of undervalued in the marketplace, really everywhere, I think. But, you know, it is what it is from a competitive perspective, and we really do use the market as what we do. But I certainly understand the sheriff's request and respect and honor that request.
Good. Well, thanks, Shannon. I got that piece. Sheriff, a couple of these other items you gave us, and I might answer them. In fact, I'll just take them in order. The Juvenile Intervention team. Have you had some conversation because basically you have conversations with the school board about supporting school resource officers. It appears this is to follow up on investigations that basically begin with juveniles at school. And perhaps it's broader. I kind of, the language, listening to you and the language is a little bit different, but have you talked to them about helping to pay for this additional juvenile intervention unit? And is there a corresponding kind of activity that goes on with the Winston-Salem PD? Because, you know, certainly a lot, you know, huge amount of youth live in Winston-Salem.
Yes, we've entered in conversation with school system. As always, money is tight everywhere. That's the same conversation that I get. And that's a great question, Dr. Martin. And that's why I came back home and asked you for it. Because at the end of the day, it will fall back on me. At the end of the day, I love my brothers and sisters on Cherry Street, but they're in some difficult times now in terms of personnel. They are not even responding to some of the requests that we're asking for IVCs because they are personnel struck right now. So what they're doing is prioritizing calls. So if I call for an IVC, involuntary commitment, and it's not high on their list, they're swamped. Literally, they're swamped. And so when we go down that road and I say, well, I didn't have the money for it, or they didn't give it to me, the liability or whatever happens is going to fall back here. And that's why I came back home and asked for it first. You all are home to me. If I go to the school board and they don't have it, I go to Winston and enter in conversations, and they're short personnel. And I understand it. I do. And that's why, again, I came to you all.
So you are saying the Winston-Salem PD has nothing in comparison, no special dedicated?
Yeah, Winston-Salem PD has a street unit and a gang unit, but they will not allow their gang unit to tie into things that are generating from the school systems that we have, because their mind is, you have the schools, anything that happens in there, that's your house, that's your wagon, fix it.
All right, I hear you. On the RealTime Crime Center, I do recall the demonstration, and it seems to me the only way that it becomes really effective is if you get a lot of, you know, cameras that are already community cameras, some of them, participating in this network, from businesses with their cameras down to doorbell cameras and whatever else, you know, is out there. And so I'm kind of, and I mean, it's a, you know, the demonstration, I understand its potential and et cetera, but you gave one example in your remarks about witnessing, I think, a armed robbery or something taking place out in Clemens near the Chick-fil-A or something, I mean, whatever. And I'm just wondering about, you know, it's, you know, technology is a great thing. It's a tool to see, you can see a lot of things, but I don't see it preventing that situation out in Clemens. I see it as providing some good video evidence to convict, which could be helpful. But I'm kind of curious about, but that could have come from the Chick-fil-A camera would have been the issue to take care of that. I'm just trying to get at what else could you point to that it's really made a difference based on the investment that you have made?
Well, I can give you several examples. I just didn't want to go into detail because one of them is an ongoing investigation, but the shooting that took place in Kernersville of the officer. You brought up a good point that the cameras are not good unless you have a buy-in from the community and the businesses. We spoke with Mr. Graham Bennett. We have all of the quality mark cameras. We have residents. We have over how many thousands? I mean, over 1,000 active cameras right now, moving towards 2,000. Right. We're approaching 2,000 camera views. Imagine 2,000 eyes in the community. It's a great point you brought up. It's not effective unless we have, and the numbers that we have are amazing and are continuously growing. And so just imagine when we start the campaign, the neighborhood campaign, speaking with persons about their door and their ring camera, the people that are registering to do that. It's an amazing thing when you sit there now and we can bring up 2,000 views. As a matter of fact, maybe I shouldn't say this, I'll slap myself on the hand later, but our system is so great that they asked us in Elizabeth City to share one of our cameras with them doing what happened down there. And in the spirit of cooperation, we loaned them one of the cameras. So there are counties across the state that are duplicating what we're doing. We were the first sheriff's office to have one, to build one. Now Buncombe County, Mecklenburg is working on one. The PD had one in Wake, but the sheriff didn't. The PD had one in Mecklenburg, but they didn't. So it is a thing of the future, and you hit it on the head. The numbers is what make it great, and we're approaching 2,000 as we stand here right now.
And there is, and correct me, there is no comparable camera system, in Winston-Salem, for the Winston-Salem PD, correct?
Winston-Salem has one as well.
Equally, one as well.
Is it equal to what? It's the same system, Fuchsia's. Do they have the numbers that we have? Probably do.
Well, I guess my question in terms of, I mean, I'm all about duplicate. In fact, a question I'm going to ask you in a minute, you can put this in the back, is that, I mean, all about not duplicating services. And I can remember in this community being on a task force in probably 95 or 6, and there was a lot of discussion about metro policing and about a city county kind of, you know, police force. With, you know, it's kind of like Charlotte. It was the Charlotte, in fact, the Charlotte people came up. Charlotte people came up and talked about how it happened in Charlotte. The outgoing police chief and sheriff spoke, and when it occurred and how all that took place. And it strikes me, you got a powerful tool with a lot of cameras, and you got one right here in your own backyard, and the two of you are basically duplicating services on investigations. And I realize different, you know, the calls are coming in and getting dispatched into the appropriate, whatever, jurisdictions, I guess. But essentially, it seems to me that it makes some sense to do some working together and trying to utilize that as a joint, you know, project between the Winston-Salem PD and the Sheriff's Office. Sounds to me like you both have a lot to offer, and that some of that kind of work. It's work to do that, but it keeps from duplicating resources, and the ability to have a 24/7 manning of that would be, quite frankly, a lot easier and could work. And it seems to me there's a way to do some joint projects together. We have city-county planning, you know, there's some big issues. You know, we do city-county projects on Map for Size, for example. We do city, county, a lot of things. And it would seem to me that, city, county utilities, looks like there could be some city, county functions, because is it not, is not our crime lab sort of also used by Winston-Salem PD? Is that correct?
Yeah, we share the same crime scene
So it
investigation.
seems like some of those kind of partnerships on this tool, which, as you say, is kind of the future, so I guess I'd encourage you to investigate that. I think you made a lot of progress. So what'd you find out?
So when we first began this, I went to Tennessee and observed that we came back and we spoke with Winston-Salem Police Department before they ever began building theirs. We were the first to build ours. I spoke directly with the chief, her command staff, and the question that came up is that right now you're the sheriff, right now I'm the chief. What happens when you're no longer the sheriff and I'm no longer the chief? Who will decide the MOU behind this? And so rather than going through a lot of hoops and hurdles that were gonna separate us, I said, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna continue on the path that we're on. And if you wanna merge them at some point down the future, that's fine. Right now, we're trying to enter into a conversation of MOU of the sharing of the images. That is kind of in limbo. And the reason that I am asking that we have our own is because if Winston decides they don't want me to see their imagery, then I'm not able to get it. I'll give you a prime example. So we're working in Piedmont Circle and some of the housing authorities. Winston has cameras over there that's in the city. Well, if I have deputies over there, should not my real-time intelligence center be able to see what's going on? And it is a thing for some reason. I know the city is the city and the county is the county, but at the same time, I need access to theirs, and I can't wait for them to say, well, I don't know. We just had a meeting, last Thursday. So I'm operating out of the premise, God bless the child that got his own. If I have my own Arctic, the county has its own, I don't need Winston's unless they want to do this. I can't wait for them. We had a homicide suspect. I had to wait for them to give me access to their cameras in a certain part of the neighborhood. I should not have to do that. But if I have my own, if I have the support of my commissioners, and you give me the resource to do that, eventually they will have to merge. Eventually they will have to come see us.
Well, I hear you, but what you're saying is not making me a happy camper.
I get it. I get it. It didn't make me one either, Doc.
It's not the direction, I think. You're just talking about building silos, not taking them down. And I guess I'm not about that. And it's not incumbent upon just you. I think all of us have to share the responsibility of our resources, whether it's the county manager talking to the city manager, whether it's some of us talking to our counterparts in the city and saying, man, this is all about, talking about our juveniles, our crime, our city, and our safety, and our county. So it's all ours.
Without
And
question.
there's the same residents, huge overlaps, and we need to be kind of working together. And that's, what you said's eye-opening kind of issue.
And here's my last take on that, Dr. Martin. Right. I went to my county manager several times to try to say, hey, can you segue me into working with the people across the street to do same things, right? I'm all about team play. I'm all about team play. The unit that you see out in an unknown area of this county, that was team play that originated with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. But while I'm waiting for team play, people are dying. While I'm waiting for this utopia to come together, people are calling. I can't not take a stance while I'm waiting on them to do this when I have the ability, with the support of my commissioners, to do that.
Well, I will make one other comment, Sheriff.
Yes, sir.
And that is, you've got a large staff, and how you deploy that staff is that is your job and is your mission. And as the county manager complimented you on, you've been able to staff positions that have not been staffed, and your recruiting efforts have been second to none. So you also have the opportunity to kind of assign people to different places and what is the most important and what is the best use. And I'd also argue you could probably reassign some folks out of your current staff to work that out and to make that happen. Just put that in your hopper to think about. I want to move to the next topic. The next one is the permits, and this came up in previous sheriff's term, and the very issue about staffing came up. And part of the solution at that time was to basically have a contract with temporary services, which I understand we still have. And it would seem to me that since as your own chart shows, I mean, permits, man, they're up and down, up and down, up and down. And holy cow, last year between April and June, I mean, it went from like under 600 to nearly 1,800, per month. That's a huge volume. And it seems to me that, temporary services have been able many times to respond, and I think that would be the better solution than hiring more people with all the benefit loads and all those other things that go with it for something that is clearly demonstrated as a seasonal kind of activity.
The one thing that a temporary can do, they have to be DCI certified to do certain work, and so you have to be an official of the sheriff's office. So we would need a DCI certified person.
Well, but you have temporary folks working right now, so are they DC certified?
No, they are mainly helping operate the fingerprinting machine, handling the cash transaction, that type of work, secretarial type work. But all the actual background work has to be DCI certified individual. And that's where we need the assistance at right now.
Kind of another issue, but I won't go there. The issue on the field patrol part, I'm not going to talk about that part. We talked about salaries. But I do want to talk a little bit about the public relations side and about communications. And I agree with you, it's very important. But I do want to tell you that this is just a little tiny, it's kind of a bone to pick from 2 telephone calls I've had from a local newspaper here that basically, not the Winston-Salem Journal, but one of our community newspapers that said, look, we have issues, we find out about it after the fact because we don't get any press releases saying that there's an Amber Alert here about this, that, and the other. We've had a such and such take place out in this neighborhood near us. We can't report it. We don't know about it. And so the call into your place is to basically say, the answer is, well, we put all this stuff on Facebook. Well, Facebook, a lot of folks don't just sit and look at Facebook all day long to get their information. They basically need a proactive release from you all when there are problems to be aware of. So I want you to help me understand that because these 2 calls were months apart. And I said, that's still a problem. The answer was, well, yes, still a problem. So help me understand this issue of not notifying with a email distribution, the old-fashioned email way, and notify proactively so people see emails and are not sitting there having to watch Facebook to get announcements.
I'll address part of it, and I'll let Chief Joyner address it. I got those same calls as well. We didn't notify them because the Amber Alert, the gentleman was located an hour or so later. So it would have been irrelevant to call because by the time they printed the story 2 days later, the man was back home. What I would tell you about some of the calls that you may have gotten, don't know what they are in particular, but that particular one, I got it myself. And I spoke with the editor on numerous occasions. The reason that you're getting them is because if I'm putting out information that's accurate and correct, there's no need for me to buy your paper. There's no need for me to hear the story because I heard it from where it originated from. That was a spirit of competition is why the complaint was there. We still are proactive in putting out information, press releases. That upset some people. A local newspaper came and sat in that same place and wanted to know the funding. They wanted to see the operation, and we opened the doors and showed it to them. People were upset because media and information is powerful. And if I can push information out just as fast as you can with a lot more accuracy since it happened here in our house. People sometimes don't like that because now you're treading into my territory. So our social media public relations is a part of that whole thing that Mr. Watts alluded to about us marketing and recruiting. It's all hand over hand. It's a part of a huge system approach. Our social media platform is to put information out, to engage the community. I got those same 2 phone calls, at least one of them I'm certain of. Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, I was just gonna, and Rocky Joyner, let's see you guys. I was just gonna answer to those 2 calls. I received both of those 2 calls as well, and one of them, the first one, was the guy that got stabbed in Walkertown. And we didn't do a press release because we were on him, we were tracking him, and we didn't want to give him any heads up. But we do that with every homicide investigation that we're working. So when we work homicides, as long as we're on the person, we don't alert the person that we're looking for them when we've got them, and we don't alert the media. The media gets the press release after we've made the arrest. And so it did upset this person, and he called, and I know him personally, and we talked about it. But it wasn't that we were keeping it from him or any other media. We were on it, and there's reasons that we keep some stuff in the dark because when we have people that's actively running, we don't want to make them run any further. But we were on it from the beginning, and I don't know. I think the issue was about the time that the Use 34 started, and it looked like we were treading on ground, and so that was just something that upset him at the time, and I explained it to him, and he seemed to be okay. And just a couple of things I just want to talk on while I'm up here is with the RealTime Center, we are meeting with Winston all the time. We're trying to work together. We tried to from the beginning. I told them in the meeting Thursday that we wanted to start this together. They have one person that's watching their cameras, and that's all they have. They don't have the manpower to shift over there. And it is a group effort. Their cameras are different from our cameras. So they've got over 1,000, we've got over 1,000. So together we've got 200 or 2,000, almost 3,000. And all it takes is for us to switch since we're on the same system, and we've got 3,000 cameras. And we talked about, utilizing their personnel with our personnel. Right now, they're not inclined to do that. And so it does need to be watched 24 hours a day. We can't give you numbers on how much we prevent. I can tell you that the shooting that happened in Clemens, that was before we had it up and running. So yes, we did use the cameras for evidentiary purposes, but at that time, we didn't have the fully staffed people watching. And so we'll never be able to measure how much crime that we deter having that. But with those 3 those 3 civilian positions, that takes the place of multiple officers that we can have on the streets. I mean, them being in that room watching those cameras takes the place of 2,000 officers, and it's a whole lot cheaper to have 4 civilians in there 24/7 than it is to have 2,000 officers on the street. And whenever a crime occurs, we geofence that area and activate those cameras that we know are there, and then we are able to see live what's happening in that area before our officers get there. And even with the event in Kernersville, where he's at, so we can know that he's outside of our perimeter. We need to set up a new perimeter because here he is on these cameras, which we did and ended up catching him. And that's one of the things where it came vital that that we had that position in there, and it worked. And we've caught a lot of people off the doorbell cameras since people have been registering, where people are stealing packages, breaking in the front doors, everything like that. These are nice 1080, beautiful, clear face shots. I've got mine on it, my son's on it. It's a wonderful thing to have. And then I just want to go back just to the telecommunicator just for a little bit. Like you said, we honored them a couple months ago. I know we have studies that says that they're making 101% like everybody else, but we've been short there ever since I've been here. And we give back money every year for the salaries that we're short. And what they're telling us is that they need more money. They could recruit better if they had more money. And so if we raise their salaries and we get them, then that's well spent money. If we raise it and they don't give us more people, you're going to get it back next June 30th if we still don't fill those positions. But I don't think we have to be average like everybody else. If we're short and we know we're short, we can step above the average a little bit and try to try to get people in here. And, I hear that, well, if we pay yours, we're gonna have to go across the board and pay everybody. But I think that's great. I think every communicator in here, whether it's county fire or sheriff or even Winston PD, they need more money. They are absolutely our first line of defense. They are traumatized as much as any of us that see stuff. They have to hear stuff that they can't unhear, and they're making just above what our senior office assistants are making, and they're certified, and they have to live the horror of the victims every day, and they're well underpaid, and that's just all I want to say about those. And so everything else, whatever y'all decide, I'm good. But those three things I'm just kind of passionate about, and the office guy. We have had, ever since I've been here and before I got here, we've never been able to keep up with the pistol permits, to the point that when people have concealed carry, if they don't get in and get their stuff before it runs out, they lose it and have to go to school and pay money to go back to school all over again. And so we're even trying to prioritize those, but even those people can't even get a permit or an appointment to come in 3 months out because we're full. And the market does go up and down, and in a couple years from now, if it goes down, then we can look at taking away the position. I mean, I always say that when we promote somebody, when we promote you, we can take it back if you're not doing the job. If you give us a position and it ends up it's not needed later, we can always look at taking it back or giving it back. But that's really all I had. So I appreciate you listening.
Thank you. Last question, I'm done, and I apologize for
all right.
monopolizing the conversation, but I ask you this question to put in the back of your head.
Yes, sir.
So my question to you have a good relationship with Chief Thompson.
I do.
So when's the time to start talking about looking at down the road a plan that basically says we need a Metro Police?
Listen, I think that's a great suggestion. I think that the sheriff's office should be the lead of the Metro Police Department for the city and the county. Since it's a constitutional office, I think the city should submit and say, hey, the sheriff is going to take over your police department. I think it's a great idea. I think we should get together on it. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Hence the high sheriff speak.
That's Bobby speaking.
An awful lot of what we've been doing this morning is all kinds of things run through my mind. The word consolidation has been around for a long time. When I was first elected in 1994, they were talking about, they being the commissioners in the city, about consolidation. And here we are in 2021, we're talking about consolidation. Another thought that went through my mind, Sheriff, is a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, and that's what we've heard this morning, which you're speaking softly, but you carry a big stick, and you're trying to figure out how best to get positive results for the citizens of the county. And when you say, the police have cameras and it's not, we almost have to go get permission to look at that, that doesn't make sense from my perspective. The other part of this is you've got record numbers of people buying guns. And you got to ask yourself the question, why is that? And I understand there are ups and downs to everything, but you only buy something to use it. The question is, who's going to buy it, who's going to use it, and who wins or loses on that? And that's what I think you're talking about. And from my point of view, I can understand what Vice Chairman Martin is saying, because he's hit the nail on the head in a number of areas, and you've agreed with him. But when at the end of the day, when the sun goes down, you don't want two teenagers on the front page of the Winston-Salem Journal going to prison and a 16-year-old who got their bullet not around anymore. And I know that's from a personal point of view, I know how I would approach that, and I think you're the same way. And I personally hope that we can find some way, some method. And Dudley, if it means refining, streamlining, or coming to some type of an agreement, interlocal agreement, if not between us and the city, we can do it. I mean, the Kernersville Police Department is staffed and they have people who are working full time. But it might be wise at this point as a starting point to look at the interlocal agreements that we have that could be refined to the point where if the sheriff wants something from a camera that's located somewhere in the county or in the city, access, it would seem to me he should have access to that, just as they should have access to what we have. And correct me if I'm wrong now, Sheriff. We have a camera, and Don Martin has a camera, I have a camera. It's my camera, you can't look at it unless I say that's true. And Don Martin will say the same thing. It just causes a problem that is almost, you can't solve it. So from my perspective, it's just, all this conversation today is really worthwhile. I don't think we've talked about this. And you're the guy that, from my perspective, that really could make things happen. And I know the relationship between you and the chief is, you're not enemies by any stretch of the imagination. So it's not territorial, it's mutual consent. And that's basically where I'm coming from. Everybody does, you do a good job.
I appreciate that.
I just, I think that big stick you've got you need a little help to swing it, and we can do that, but we have to give you some money to make it happen. And that's the reason I asked the question about the totals at the deputy level and the finance level. Mr. Manager, am I off base on interlocal agreements, or do we look at these interlocal agreements to see what we can or can't do?
Yeah, so there's the city-county agreement that has lots of services that are consolidated, and then there are some that we've just created separate agreements over the years, like evidence storage and some things like that. So there's always a little reluctance to open up the big agreement just because it's so comprehensive.
I understand that, but if we spend $5,000 on a camera and they spend $5,000 on a camera, it doesn't make sense for us to say, well, it's my camera, you can't see what's on it, you know?
Yeah, I don't think we'd open up the city-county agreement to that. I do think you might open up the evidence storage piece and the affidavit work that's being done in the jail. There's a couple that you could certainly do that. I actually emailed Lee as we were kind of going through things. I think the truth is that our sheriff is aggressive in what he wants to achieve, and he is. I think he senses and pushes that he's pushing city council and the city PD into some areas around technology, around some cooperative efforts around trying to deal with the gun violence issues that we have and some of the social justice issues, and even more aggressive around the public outreach piece of it. And so, sometimes it's hard when you're out front rowing and you're carrying a lot of it, and I think that's where the sheriff is. And sometimes those tables turn. The sheriff's made a lot of progress in a lot of areas across really all of these items.
Well, all things considered, Mr. Manager and Sheriff, we're all aiming for the same thing.
Yes, sir.
It's just a matter of how we go about it, and how much it's going to cost. And I think, speaking for myself, and I think for a number of commissioners here, we'll do everything we can to help you. And if we can't get it done now, we'll get it done in the longer term than the shorter term, but the final result has to be to answer some of the questions about the problems and needs of the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department. And I hope we can do that.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Plowler. On a side note, what you and Dr. Martin said are correct. There needs to be some teamwork on that. We met with Wake Forest last week. They're coming online with their future system, their version of Arctic. We've given them access to what we have. Nothing I have is mine. So I have no problems giving access to. Matter of fact, we offered it last week to them, to Winston. So, but by that same line, I don't want to be tied down to waiting on somebody to feed me. I don't want to be tied down to somebody giving me access and then shutting me off when I'm in an active investigation of a homicide suspect. I don't need that. I need the ability from my family to do what I have to do, and I consider you all a part of my family. Forsyth County. And so that is why I'm asking what I'm asking for. At some point, when this agreement, this utopia takes place, I would love to see that. Because many heads makes many senses, you know. So I appreciate the comments, and I thank you all for your time.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question, please.
Yes, sir.
Only 30 seconds.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Sheriff. And I think it comes from our statutory comment too in our Constitution. I was involved with Ms. Maddie Young about maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years now. Someone in front of her house shot her vehicle up. Fortunately, she was not injured. And I went to her home, we talked for a while, and I noticed there was a camera right across the street from her home. So quite naturally, I called the housing authority. To my dismay, here's a camera that was not working. So my question is, are you in conversation with the housing authority to perhaps incorporate the current system to be included into your real-time crime center on some capacity?
So it's another great question. Last week, Kevin Cheshire and myself, he came to the office and we talked. And my question was, I didn't have access to his cameras. And he said that, in full transparency, he said that we have an MOU with Winston. And what I said to him was that if you expect me to keep putting my resources into your area, you're gonna have to give me access to them. And he did that. Yesterday, I was over in Piedmont Circle again, myself, Ms. Spees, Ms. Parham. He was on the phone, and I was basically talking with him about how we would like to position and do some things there. And so I've been in contact with Mr. Cheshire, I know for over 6-7 months now. He and I met personally last week. We talked. He gave us access. We have access, right? He gave us access because that was one of the complaints that I had. I said that I should not have to ask you for this. I should have access to it. If I have men and women working in your area, I should have access to the same thing that the other agency has. And he agreed to that. He's an attorney by trade, and he understood that. And he didn't hesitate. He didn't mix words. He gave us access.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff, I appreciate.
Chairman.
Yes, go right
Yes.
ahead.
I just have a few comments as well. Hello, Sheriff Bobby Kimbrough. Thank you so very much for all that you do.
Thank you.
And I have a little quote for you as myself today. So they said that heavy is the head that wears the crown, but strong is the neck that bears it. So with that, I wanted to just say I appreciate the work that the Office of the Sheriff of the Citizens do for Forsyth County. However, I wanted to address a few elephants in the room.
Yes.
We get a lot of calls from the Triad Abolitionist group who want to talk about the funding for the Sheriff's Office. And although it seems like a lot, I can assure you that many, but I can speak for myself, receive phone calls and emails of appreciation of the services for the Sheriff's Department. My thoughts for you today relative to the Juvenile Intervention team is regarding some suggestions around the collaboration, the alignment of work with the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, Public Health, DSS, and Behavioral Health. Those things are most important. You and I both have gotten in our genes, and we've gotten in this community, and many times when I ring a doorbell, you're already there with a family that has lost a loved one or a youth in this community to gun violence or to gangs. So, you know, I wanted to just say thank you for the enlightenment about your struggles, and we are here to support you with that. Knowing that my role as a county commissioner here in Forsyth County is to be accountable and transparent in terms of the funding. So with that, I would want you to I appreciate you looking at that media budget and making some adjustments around that, but knowing that our future is now, and we plan on, it's our goal to continue to support you in any way that we can. So I say thank you.
I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Commissioners, further comments? Sheriff, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your being here. We hear you. Just give us a little time.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Commissioners, I think we've been at this almost an hour and a half. Let's take a 15 minutes, Commissioner Martin, and we'll come back in 15 minutes to continue our business. For those watching on Channel 13 on cable, you're watching the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, and we are coming out of a recess where we've been talking about monies to be spent on the budget for the coming year. We have approximately $503 million to dispose of in a very thoughtful, correct manner. And to help us get through that, call on our County Manager, Dudley Watts, to continue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for a good session this morning, and appreciate y'all's attention to these serious matters. So the next group of items we're going to talk about are really follow-ups from the public hearing that was held yesterday, and we had a couple of things that we identified as staff that we want to make sure there's no confusion around. And then there's just a follow-up to a little more of the conversation that occurred. So under that category, we want to review the behavioral health funding recommendations real quickly and really just bring to light that there were a few requests for funding that were not in the alternate service level list, and we wanted to make sure you understood what that was all about. So I'll turn it over to Chantel, and she can review that.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Towards the end of April, I had provided an overview to all of you on the behavioral health recommendations. That was essentially the recommendations from the Health and Human Services Committee. We just wanted to make sure that all of you remembered that there were several organizations that requested dollars, but the Health and Human Services Committee did not fully recommend some of the amounts. So yesterday you heard from NAMI as an example, and they were requesting $9,000, but our committee recommended $6,000. You also heard from Family Services. They were requesting, let me find it real quick, I'm sorry.
And it's actually on page 105 of your budget book. If you turn to that, that's where we outline what those recommendations
Yep, thank you, Dudley. They were requesting $147,000, and the committee recommended $60,000, and that was to provide them with one full-time therapist. And so again, I really just wanted to make sure that there was clarity around, since there were a few callers in the public comment session yesterday, that some of the amounts requested were not fully recommended by the Health and Human Services Committee. But I would be happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Any questions, Commissioners?
And I guess the other guidance would be, we have not automatically taken those amounts that weren't funded in the behavioral health MOE process, because the Consolidated Human Services Board has a subcommittee, and they actually help us sort through those. We've not taken those and automatically put those in an alternate service level when we give you the budget, a couple months after that process goes through. And if we need to, we can. I just, it didn't occur to me until we were in that public hearing that folks are going to view that, they may think that that's still up for consideration. From our perspective, the Consolidated Human Services Board made those decisions. But if you want us to automatically take those and put those in it as an alternate service level for regular county funding and not funding through the MOE process, we can certainly do that.
I'm opposed to doing that because this committee spends a great deal of time and investigation into making these recommendations, and I'm very pleased with their recommendations, and I think it's almost an insult to them for us then to turn around and add it to our own budget.
Any further thoughts?
I'd just like to ditto.
I have a couple.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions on that group, because one of the items that was kind of in that mix that was listed in alternative service request was the chaplaincy program. I got a letter on that. I read the letter on that about the history of the, I guess, Baptist paid for at one time 80% at the beginning, and that the amount of use that it's used for so many other, like I guess sheriff's deputies, and also with EMS and those folks, that the idea was it's been this for so long that we ought to be ratcheting that up at some point, and the suggestion was that we split the cost with Baptist. And I mean, the implication was that you check with your folks and do it. We get used a lot and do a lot of things, and since maybe there should be a revisiting of the percentages and how that's done. And I thought it was a pretty thoughtful letter, and whether we need to
Well, that was given a
do
great
that or
deal.
not, I mean, I noticed that, I think it's been 75,000 for a long time.
Yeah, the history actually goes back to the sheriff. It was a staff person. Glenn Davis was a staff person actually in the command staff of the sheriff's department, who retired. When he retired, the sheriff, I believe, retained the position, but and kind of utilized it in other areas. Glenn came back to us through Wake Forest and said, I'm going to do what I've been doing for the sheriff's department around, that chaplaincy support and that behavioral kind of health support. I'm going to be doing it with Wake Forest Baptist, really across the community in their faith health initiative. And so brought that to us. It was funded through the MOE process to really support not just the sheriff's department. In the early days, it was really just support for, something traumatic happens on the scene. Those guys were, Glenn was there and served in that role. We did expand it so that EMS and fire and really the other emergency responders and really across the county, I think DSS is actually a user of it as well. And so we have expanded it. It is funded with MOE funds. It is for, a specified population. I'm not sure if the city of Winston participates in it or not. I'll turn it over to Chantel. She'll go into way more detail. But, there's some history around it. We picked up funding back through the MOE process. You get yourself in a little bit of a question about, obviously, more intense support for first responders and victims, because they actually support victims on the scene as well, is a good way to serve the community. But there are also all the other behavioral health supports for everybody in the community through the BHUC and some other things. So it's really a policy decision.
So this position, the $75,000, essentially was to expand the contract they already had with the sheriff's office. This $75,000 is for them to be able to provide chaplaincy services for all county departments. I'd have to pull the amount that they were charging just for the sheriff's office, which was a very nominal amount. And so we do use behavioral health funds for this. It is for county services. It is my understanding that the chaplaincy program, though, also spends a great deal of time with the city of Winston-Salem and Kernersville and various other first responders that I do not believe they pay for anything either. It's through Wake Forest Baptist Health. And so I know for myself, when we've asked them for various reports in order to even, justify the $75,000 that we expend, we do have a significantly challenging time getting good quantifiable data. And I get it. I mean, they are a lot of places, but for us, trying to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, we also need justification of the amount that we provide to them. And so they continue to try to work on the reporting for us. But, from staff's perspective, from my perspective, I'm comfortable with the $75,000 that we provide to them. It is for county departments, and it's, possible that maybe they could try to seek other funding from the city of Winston-Salem or some other municipalities.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've worked with Glenn over the years with Vigils for Healings. They do an outstanding job when I was a death, and we sort of reclaim that area. But the budget submitted by the committee, I think is very sufficient. We spent a lot of time going through those line item by line item. Some hours were invested, so I'm supporting my colleague here, Commissioner Gloria Whisenhunt, on adopting the budget as presented.
I think leaving it in this process is good. Part of the issue is it says the team is now 4 full-time members. Is that the comment was basically during the early days, early developmental years of this service, 80% of the cost was borne by the hospital. And he said it's not an experiment anymore. His implication was it began as an experiment. Now it's not, and he's suggesting we ought to pay about half of the cost, and you know, to get up to that kind of amount. And he gives a whole bunch of the really, you have data. Data is an issue. I guess the question is, if there was, I take it there's no interest in moving that at all. But apparently, maybe somebody needs to talk to the head guy and help him understand all that. If lack of data, whatever it is, and find out are they providing services in Kernersville and just directly with him.
The only other point of clarification I wanted to provide is the chaplaincy services does not apply for behavioral health funding because they are providing services to county employees. So it is outside of that process. They really just submit a contract through our contract control process where staff reviews it. And so they are not part of the committee's recommendation because it is a service that they're, it's part of the continuation budget, but we do carve out behavioral health dollars for that purpose.
So then should there be something, because that is a part of this letter. He kind of says the county should at least do that for their own employees. So is there some bifurcation where there's something we should be paying for if different from behavioral health?
So essentially we are though. We're just using behavioral health dollars for this service for county employees. But in addition to chaplaincy for county employees, we have the employee assistance program. We have a behavioral health counselor through the health and wellness clinic. We have a health and wellness clinic. But it is an additional employee benefit, but since it is connected to behavioral health, especially for first responders out in the field, we're able to use behavioral health dollars for it.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the behavioral health counselor is fairly recent. That's been in place 2 years maybe?
A little over 2 years, I think.
Yeah, and so we funded that through the internal service fund, really through health benefits.
So it moved out of that and then became a part of the behavioral health. Am I getting this correct?
No, so this chaplaincy program, so as Dudley said, first it was a chaplain position within the sheriff's office. That person retired. They reclassed that position to a victim service coordinator in the sheriff's office, who is also a chaplain by trade and also goes on first responder calls in that capacity. And he assists victims as well as sheriff's office employees on the scene. That is a county position. This $75,000 agreement that we had with Wake Forest Baptist Health was specifically for county to expand the program beyond just the sheriff's office to all county employees and all departments. So we do utilize them when there's traumatic events, say for the Department of Social Services or emergency services, but that was the agreement with them for the $75,000.
And in addition to that, the internal service fund through the health benefits plan pays through a contract with Wake Forest, for the clinic, the employee health clinic, and in that clinic is a behavioral health counselor. So you got a couple different places.
Unrelated to the chaplaincy.
Unrelated.
Thanks, that's what I was, that's where I got a little confused.
Sorry about that. It's a lot, and I have talked to Dr. Gunderson about that and explained that one of the difficulties here is that we have been investing in our employees' mental health, and we've just done it in a couple different directions, and to some extent he's competing in that consideration for that, and we are still evaluating the employee health clinic as a pilot to some extent, and the behavioral health person there as well. But the last year has been difficult, and I think that the behavioral health presence there has been very, very important, and that is not really crisis driven. That is I mean, that is not traumatic event driven as a, line of work kind of function. That's just if somebody needs that assistance. And so.
On a different one, on ARCA, there looks like one item in that page 105 list for data programs, and there's an alternative service request that apparently is a capital request for $1 million+ in their second phase of their work, which I assume is obviously totally different. But it's another place where ARCA is showing up two different places.
That's correct. Yeah, so ARCA was recommended for $30,000 funding through the MOE dollars, and then in the alternate service level request is their phase 2. You heard a little bit about it from Daryl yesterday in terms of their phase 2 expansion of what they're in the process of building over at Springwood right now.
They did not apply through the behavioral health process for the $1 million capital campaign.
And another another part, how many of those things fit within potential ARP things? Because as I went through each of these, I started saying, well, that one looks to me like it could be an ARP program, and it looks like some of these are in the census tracts and some of those kind of things. So I got to thinking about that could handle some of these things.
So it is hot off the press. We're going to hand you a new alternate service level list with some determination of whether or not budget staff got together and they thought through the rules as we know them now, and we've made some preliminary determinations, and so we will get that to you in just a little bit. I was actually, when we get down to review of ASL request, I was going to hand that out to you.
We had that somewhere because I've seen it.
Yeah, we had an early rendition of it that needed work on it, and so we've done a more intensive piece of work on that. It is subjective as heck, depending upon how you look at the rules, but we've done one step deeper with all of our smart budget staff, and so we've got that to give you, and we'll review that pretty quickly.
Good.
I apologize. It's probably sitting on a printer back here in somebody's office. We just got to, he's got it. Well,
Mr. Chairman, I have one question, please, sir.
Right, sir?
Chantel, did we ever hear from the Urban League about their mental health program? Did they ever make a request? There was no request in the budget.
We did not hear from Urban League, no.
all right. Any other questions on the behavioral health piece? I know we'll delve into it a little bit deeper as we dive even deeper into the alternate service levels. Are we ready to talk about pickleball? We can,
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, do they have a request?
Pickleball.
Yeah.
Pickleball, okay.
Oh, I'm ready to talk
Well,
about
Damon is now the expert on pickleball, and he can brief you on the pickleball conversations.
Do they have a page in here? I'm just.
They do not, and so he can talk about the conversations we had that probably predicated, the yesterday thing was predicated on.
There's a package in our office about pickleball.
I know, yeah, we just got. I mean, there was a packet just got.
Yeah.
So it's not in this book. I'm just trying to keep straight.
We never received anything from,
This is it.
Well, I saw it.
I spoke with the gentleman who came to the, Albert Noda. I spoke with him on the phone, and I spoke with another gentleman on the phone about it, and basically explained our process, but I never have received any kind of request or any kind of number, and I didn't hear a number yesterday either, so, but Damon will talk about that a little bit more.
So, expert being a relative term, right? The county has heard from the Pickleball Association folks as of last October. They actually submitted a list of names of people who play pickleball with the interest in us establishing distinct pickleball courts. So what we do have at Joni Moser Park, the tennis courts have been partially converted with different colored lines to 4 pickleball courts, so you can play 4 different pickleball games there. At Union Cross and Walkertown Park, they've put out lines where you can play 3 at each of those. So for a total of 10, you can play 3 pickleball courts at Walkertown, 3 at Union Cross, and 4 at Joni Moser. So that's what we've done like today. Now they were playing indoors, and then when part of that stopped, then they started playing more at the county parks. And then we started lining the courts so that that could take place. But they're not distinct pickleball courts. What the gentleman mentioned yesterday was the potential to play at Tanglewood. And so, as you know, we have a vendor at Tanglewood, Flex Tennis, who actually we leased the courts to. So there are 4 hard courts and 6 clay courts there. The gentleman mentioned the clay courts yesterday and potentially converting some of those to playing pickleball. And so talking with the manager, one of the solutions that we have like right now in short term is to connect the Pickleball Association advocates with Flex Tennis. And so at the times when Flex Tennis is not using those courts, perhaps there's an arrangement that they can make that he can rent them the courts for a certain period of time so that they can play pickleball at Tanglewood. But again, those wouldn't be dedicated courts for pickleball. They would be courts that can be used for both tennis or pickleball. So that's what we're doing right now for pickleball. We actually haven't gotten a number. We didn't get one back in October. I didn't hear one yesterday. You all may have got one in a packet about what they want, but that's what I know at this point.
And if there's a desire to get out in front of the pickleball craze and be the leaders in pickleball, we can consider building some pickleball courts. So depends on how aggressive you want to be, and if this thing's going to be the next big deal, we can be the pickleball camp place of the world.
And right now, the converted courts are first come, first served, and there's no fee for them to play there, which may be different at Tanglewood if they go through the vendor there.
Well, I would just like to speak on behalf of tourism. It is something that tourism has certainly have on their wish list because of the tournaments. Apparently, they draw big crowds and stay over the weekend in hotels and eat in restaurants. And so, just out of curiosity, I would like to see us give it further study. And it certainly shouldn't be in the budget this year since they didn't make a request. But I would like to see us do further study for the future.
Yeah, and he gave the example of Statesville yesterday, and maybe see if what Statesville has done. I couldn't see his pictures, but he was talking about it at Statesville. It sounded like it was a competitive arena place for bring in people. But since you're the expert, Damon, I've played pickleball, but I've never seen it on a soft tennis court, and I can't imagine those soft courts being converted into pickleball courts. I just can't imagine, and they're some of the best in this county at Tanglewood. Those soft. When he mentioned that yesterday, I just went, "What?" I mean, I've never heard that. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not. Ian actually is a player of pickleball. It looks like a wiffle ball a little bit. It's a
wiffle ball. Yeah, absolutely. It's a wiffle ball.
And so I don't know how that would
Playing
bounce
paddle.
on
Paddle and
clay.
wiffle.
Ian explained to us this pickleball thing that's going on. He actually has a pickleball injury. He didn't want me to tell anybody that, but that probably violates some HIPAA thing. I'm really sorry about that, but he told me that. So.
All right, so the pickleball people, they want to resurface the clay courts. Into hard courts.
You're talking to a tennis player here now, so that's right.
But so just for a number, I know my dad is out of Wilkesboro, and I'm part of the Wilkesboro pickleball crew up there. So they just built 6 courts in Wilkesboro for $97,000. $30,000 of it was for dirt, and then it was about $12,000 for each court. But it was $97,000 for 6 courts, and so Wilkesboro has 8 courts, dedicated pickleball courts in Wilkesboro, and Statesville's got 6. Greensboro's got, I think, 12 at Method Park. And I've played in tournaments, and like you said, it is a big draw. But I won't say any more.
You're good, man.
And I do have an injury. Thank you.
We appreciate your expertise. That's great.
Seems like, Mr. Chairman, there was a number thrown out yesterday about $13,000 required to have a pop-up court of some sort. Does anybody remember that besides me in the presentation?
think it was a dream last night.
I do remember him saying you could retrofit courts, which is probably just painting them, I guess. And I don't know if those lines would drive tennis players crazy to have a whole new set of lines in the middle of the court. That might be.
Well, that's probably not a problem. Tobacconville courts, which are the Tobacconville managers, they have a big pickleball group up there. I've seen them playing.
Okay.
And they just paint it right. And I think the pop-up is you probably bring in a net. I think you bring in a net, because he talked about taking 3 courts and turning it into 6. He talked about 3 courts, turning it into 6, so you're playing sideways
So
on the tennis court with a pop-up net.
So at Granville Park, there's 4 tennis courts, right? And so there's 2 of them are lined for pickleball. So, pickleball players have to go buy portable nets. So my portable net's $180. So that's an expense passed on to the pickleball players. So you bring your own net, you go play. I play forever, so I play 6 hours, but like when other people leave, they take the net, so then you lose courts. So I just stay the whole time. But so tennis players don't like the lines and the Pickleball Association here has tried to paint. So at Granville, it's blue courts with blue lines. I'm colorblind, I can't see the lines. Joni Moser is green lines on green courts. Hard to see, again, for a colorblind person. But as far as, again, I'll just go back to Wilkesboro, $97,000. It's $30,000 to the dirt, and then about $12,000 to have dedicated courts with actual nets. It is free to play. I understand Tanglewood would not be, and I don't think they care. They just want dedicated courts so that we're not competing with tennis players. A lot of times, at Granville Park, if tennis players show up, we will leave the court because it is a tennis court. So you kind of get pushed out if tennis players show up. And that's just us trying to be polite to the tennis players because it is a tennis court. But yeah, so it's pop-up nets, bring your paddle, bring your balls. So. Any other questions? I guess I am the expert, Damon.
I agree, we ought to look into it. We ought to study that up and see what's some possible, because it does have a tourism, and older people play. Yeah. It's kind of an older person's game more.
Okay.
Cool.
You got Ted's attention when you said
So
that.
is croquet. Good croquet tournaments up in the mountains.
That's right.
Well, why couldn't you build a croquet court and a pickleball court?
You could.
Okay,
You could have a senior center right behind it.
there you go.
All right. So I'm hearing some interest in pickleball, and I think pulling in Rich Geiger and Visit Winston will be helpful. I also asked Lee if the city's having the same discussion with their tennis courts around their facilities. So, all right, very good. So we'll kind of move into status of the recommended budget. And so, Kyle, if you want to go ahead and hand out that status sheet that is the most current, and then while you're doing that, why don't you go ahead and hand out the alternate service level list with the ARP piece that's there, and you can step through that. And we've talked about that second item, the sheriff's status of parity with City of Winston-Salem. If we have any follow-on questions with that, we can deal with them. I added fire tax district, and I know that the Rural Hall question was really sort of the one that was out there, and we do have Megan Garner, who's the town manager in Rural Hall here, and her finance person as well. And so if there are questions, we can deal with that, but we'll go ahead and ask Kyle to dive into the sort of the status of where we are right now. The other thing that you're gonna see on that really brings us into that last item, which is the review of the ASL request. And I have included my county manager's recommended ASL request in that, and we can step through that after we get through with fire tax district stuff. And I'll give you, Kyle, if you give them just a moment to peruse that a little bit so they can get their bearings, and then we'll get started in it. I don't know if you want to pop it up on the on the Elmo too. Do you need an extra copy?
I've got one over here.
Okay.
So, so what I'm showing now is there's just a couple of adjustments, and then we can talk about some other things. But as you will remember, when you received the budget a couple weeks ago, it was balanced at a total number of $502,706,982. There's really just like two adjustments to mention first. And so one is, because we were making this other adjustment, I went ahead and added it. So there was a grant that had been applied for with Cooperative Extension that is budgeted in it's included in the recommended budget, but it was included at a lower number, and they received an actual award significantly higher. So there's no there's no county dollars with this increase. There's no county dollars associated with it, and so it will increase revenues and expenditures by the $124,934. And then the other adjustment, you heard from Lee Plunkett last Thursday that we were still trying to finalize all of the debt leveling implications of the upcoming bond sale. So you'll remember we reduced the amount of issuance for Callidium, and then there were some other adjustments that were made as well. And the result of it is that the transfer to the Capital Reserve Fund is decreasing in the current budget in FY22 from $75,162,524 down to $74,602,784. So there's a savings of $559,740 on the transfer piece. So the actual amount of money that we have to transfer to the Capital Reserve Fund to pay for the debt service. So there's a savings there. And the other thing that Lee had mentioned was there was the potential for the courthouse debt leveling plan as well as the 2016 public improvement debt leveling plan tax rate to move a little bit. And he was talking about 0.8 of a cent. And really, as a result of his discussions with our fiscal agent and other contracts that we have there, the actual rate is actually 0.1 of a cent, not 1/8 of a cent. And so the courthouse debt leveling plan rate is going to actually go down from what we were showing in the budget that you have by 0.05 of a cent, and then the 2016 public improvement debt leveling plan will also go down by 0.05. And so the net effect of that basically means that so the 2016 public improvement debt leveling plan was going to increase from 2.9 to 5.5 cents. And so instead of 5.5, it will increase to just 5.45 cents. And then the courthouse debt leveling plan, which was at 2 cents, was going to decrease to 1.25. It will now be at 1.20 cents. And so,
and what I would add about that is that really is in anticipation of this debt sale that's going to happen at the end of this month. And so what we ask Lee to do is give us the most current, as bond index changes and all that stuff goes on, give us the most current estimate that he feels comfortable with, and we just had this opportunity. So we sort of knew we were going to get these last minute adjustments, but we also know that you don't want to take any taxpayer money that's not needed, so we went ahead and include that in that. So
that's right. And so, so reducing the tax rate by that 0.1 of a cent, it reduces the revenue by almost $423,000. But again, the savings from the transfer exceed that, and so just to keep a balance, we reduced the fund balance that we have appropriated there by $136,968. So that gets you to an adjusted recommended budget of $502,272,176. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, prior to discussing alternate service levels.
okay, any questions on Say that rate one more time, just so it's in everybody's head, because we were at
Right, so we were at 68.88, and so now it will be 68.78. And again, education debt leveling rate is 4.3 cents, which that's down from 4.51. The library debt leveling plan is at 0.55. It was at 0.57. And then the courthouse debt rate will go from we'll go from 2.0 to 1.2. And then the public improvement plan, the 2016 public improvement debt leveling plan will go from 2.9 up to 5.45 instead of 5.5.
Thank you. All right. Very good. Before I dive into these alternate service level requests, if I could turn it over to Damon just for a second to talk about kind of where we are with the recommendation for Rural Hall. I think that's really the only, I don't want to call it contentious, but only kind of questioned recommendation we have around fire tax districts.
So just generally, So generally, this was a reval year. And so you can see in the first column, right there was the current tax rate. That's the same column for all of the different fire departments. And then for the revenue neutral rate, you'll see what that was for each of the departments, and then the requested rate, which is essentially this generally was to stay at their current tax rate. Now there are some kind of anomalies in there where South Fork, which is actually served by Clemens, their revenue neutral rate would have been an increase, but they're actually staying at 6 cents because they're being treated the same as the department that serves them, which is Clemens. If you come down and you look at King, they're going revenue neutral, but for King, since their tax base did not have an increase in value for a variety of reasons, they chose to go revenue neutral, which actually was beneficial to them because to stay at their current rate would have been 7.5 cents versus 8.4 cents. And I just noted Louisville and West Bend again because their revenue neutral rates are different, but their request rate would be the same because Louisville actually serves West Bend. So we were keeping the districts that are served by departments the same, not changing them so they varied by their differing revenue neutral rates. This is the second page of fire departments. So again, you can see their current rates, what the revenue neutral rates would be. Here, they're all the same because all these districts and service districts are served by Mineral Springs, so they're at 11.5, so they're all at 11.5. And then Rural Hall, which was their current rates at 11, they requested 11. We recommended the revenue neutral rate, which essentially was 9.98 cents, so we rounded it up to 10. And really, the only thing that we didn't recommend was the fire marshal position, which we talked about a little bit. Whereas I didn't recommend that because the people in the suburban district already have fire marshal services. And so I basically pulled that out. Now, reducing Rural Hall to revenue neutral was a difference of $51,265. So that was what was reduced to take it back to 10 cents. And then all the rest of them, you can see Salem Chapel is also revenue neutral, but that's because they requested to go revenue neutral. So they wanted that. So it didn't make that big of a difference dollar-wise. And then again, Vienna and Mount Tabor, the same, serviced by the same department, so they have a similar rate. And then Walkertown, City View, Tally's Crossing had their merger. So although their revenue neutral rates are all different, they all have the same rate as the serving department, the lead department of Walkertown. So really the only department that was at question that didn't actually get what they requested was Rural Hall that serves the suburban district outside of the town. And that was really what the question was. We recommended revenue neutral, which is essentially 10 cents, and they requested 11. And the difference there is $51,265 is the difference between revenue neutral and not going revenue neutral.
And our encouragement to them would be, and I would say this, I think I've said it to Megan, I have encouraged the town to go ahead and vote to participate in the overlay district. They would essentially get all those services from county fire, including the 09s, if they would do that. And that rate just dropped from 7.7 to 7.3.
0.39.
Yeah, it dropped down to 0.39, so it almost got cut in half. You know, I don't know if the town is aware of that or not. But that would be our preference in there, and really the basis for not really agreeing to pay for the fire marshal service.
And you have, I've shared with you some correspondence that the fire marshal submitted on Friday, as late as Friday. And in that, you know, the town notes that it does other things. So it's kind of a firefighter, fire marshal. But I want to let you know I shared that with you. So.
Megan, thank you. I appreciate you being here, and certainly hope you convey our appreciation to your town officials about the partnership here. It's just probably a disagreement, but a respectful one.
So if I'll make sure I understand this, which I was confused, I guess the last time we discussed this, and I did speak with Councilman in Rural Hall. So when you discounted, when you looked at excluding the fire marshal part, how much was that exclusion?
So the cost of the position, supplies and all, was $77,000. So what we ended up doing was having the department go revenue neutral, which reduced the budget by $52,000. I didn't take out an entire 77, just 52, right. And you know, rounded that up to 10 cents from 9.98 cents.
Yeah, judging from the communication we got Friday, and I was just reviewing that and the conversation I had, it appears that clearly the fire marshal position in Rural Hall, which is new, actually does a whole lot, does many more things other than what might be traditionally the inspections, education, whatever that a fire marshal would do. So it's kind of it has the title fire marshal, but it really is almost, it appears almost like a utility kind of position. It does a lot of fill-ins for, you know, people out, covering some of the 24/7, some of the overnight things, some of the other stuff. In fact, the fire marshal mentions a couple of those things in his letter on Friday. So I think that instead of discounting the 77,000, I know we were still kept it up at there was only 50,000 in the 1 cent. If that number were considered to be less than 77, then there might be warranted a small increase to treat them as the other departments. And I don't know what the equivalent tax rates do, but the difference is, it looks like if you took off 70, if you only took off 30, and the difference was 50, it looks like there's another at least 20,000 plus that we would give them, that we could give them in the same kind of analysis that you applied to the other departments. Am I saying that right?
So what Ashley did was reduced it by 52,000 or $51,265. That's the cost to go revenue neutral.
Yes.
So the position was valued at 77,000.
And I'm suggesting value it at half of that.
Mm-hmm. So that would be to add another 30.
It'd probably equate to about a 10.5 rate. I mean, basically, instead of going 10, you'd go 10.5.
Yeah,
run the numbers.
Yeah, it may equate to that. Yeah, it'd be close. It'd be very close, because obviously if a cent is 50, it's going to be about 20. Yeah, that would be very close to that. And that just seems to be that would be more treating them like the other departments. That's all I'm trying to say.
And I agree with that. I think 10.5%. And I think everybody's wish is that if they'd go to overlay, life would be so much simpler for everybody. And I still would encourage those rural hog town council to do that. But I do think 10.5 is fair.
Anything else on fire tax district stuff? Any other questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Megan, last call, anything? Okay, very good. All right. All right, very good. So, the next thing that we were going to do, and, let me make sure I didn't have anything else. Kyle, do you have anything else on any of the items leading up to the county manager's recommended SLs? Let us just spend a moment, if we can, just run down on these and just give you kind of a quick overview of these. And again, you know, on the special appropriations, we do not really ever make any suggestions on those. The operational ones, we do in cases where particularly around service levels are impacted. So let me go ahead and dive into the ones that we did recommend. So emergency services, EMS unit hour utilization improvement plan. Darren Ziegler, our emergency services director, is back there, and he can certainly speak to this. As you know, we have really been working all year around trying to dive into staffing issues around EMS, trying to coordinate them with what the state is doing around their certification processes, because they are making it more difficult to create paramedics. We have learned a lot through what has been really a every 2-week meeting for a while. We've gone to once a month now to try to understand what's going on. And then we created a dashboard that we look at. Part of me wants to pull that up on the screen if I can. Ian, wonder if I could get you to come up to that computer and pull that dashboard up. Or could you try to do that? And if we can get it on the screen, the commissioners will see exactly what we're looking at. We basically look back at what's happening with unit hour utilization every month to see if it's getting better or worse. We compare that with staffing and try to try to understand exactly what's going on with all of that. You know, it's complicated because it is based on how many trucks we have available at any given time to respond to the number of calls, and then how busy are those trucks on a regular basis. So, you know, if I could ask Darren Ziegler to come up and just step us through the alternate service level real quickly, just so you know what you're talking about. And then we'll give you a quick glance of this dashboard, which is available to you if you want to see it at any point in time. And so I introduce you to Darren Ziegler. As you know, he came to us after serving over 30 years with us here, went to go run Lifestar for the operations side of Lifestar for a bit, expressed interest in coming out of retirement, and appreciate Darren.
The biggest change was I need these now. So as Dudley mentioned, we've addressed, I've been working on addressing the unit hour utilization. That's just one measure of a system. Basically, it helps to identify how busy the system is, the utilization of your resources, how efficiently, or in our case, how critically things are happening. We're getting into the time of year where our call load is picking up even more, so that those numbers can change, I mean, as often as you calculate it, because you look at it over time. But it's basically the unit hours that you're providing divided by the calls that you're running. And it is kind of a standardized measure. Our goal would be to be around the 0.45 range. And what that's telling you, if you imagined a 0.50 would mean a unit is on a call 30 minutes out of every hour. Okay, so they're tied up half of every hour, would be the ballpark figure. Right now, we're at a 0.692, which is busy, which is extremely busy. A high volume system is in that area of 0.50, 0.55. So
Darren, let me just interrupt, just to give commissioners, so if you want to follow on, the alternate service level he's talking about is on page 259 in your book. Thank you, Darren, I'm sorry.
And that number I gave you was one that was actually calculated. I got that number currently, just to find out where we are this month right now. So as Dudley mentioned, we've attacked this problem from a lot of different angles. There is a supply problem with paramedics. The pipeline coming in has been difficult. It has been made more difficult by a lot of things outside of our control. We have turnover issues that we're addressing. So we're looking at this from all aspects. There's both internal and external committees working on this. We're moving forward with Forsyth Tech and with Wake Forest Baptist, part of their School of Medicine has committed through their SEAL program, which is, I'll mess this up, but it's the Center for, Center for Existential Applied Learning or something like that, but it's located right across 52 from us, so it's really close by, and it's part of their School of Medicine. A lot of our problems revolve around accreditation, and so that was something we were very interested in working with Baptist on, because with their medical school, they're very familiar with accreditation. That's something we're also moving forward with Forsyth Tech. Forsyth Tech historically has only had a degree program. A degree program takes 2 years from start to finish before they're going to graduate as a paramedic. That's a significant time commitment, especially when you're short. We're looking at certificate programs. A certificate program can be completed anywhere from 6 to 9 months, depending on how it's run. 9 to 12 months is probably the norm across the state. So we're looking at a lot of options on how to fix the pipeline coming in. This is not a local problem. This is not a state problem. It's all over the country. We have changed operationally how we do things, how we staff. I know there was, prior to my arrival, there was some consideration of going back to QRVs or quick response vehicles, and we're working on getting those ordered. We're running those to where we put a paramedic in the field and utilize EMT staffed ambulances, because EMTs are more plentiful than paramedics. So really all of our ASL relates right back to this same thing. So ambulances, as far as the fleet goes, we've asked for 2 ambulances into this, 2 additions to the fleet. Right now, our fleet with actual ambulances sits at 25. At any given point in time, 2 of those are gone for remount to get redone. So pretty much all the time, we keep 2 trucks gone. As I speak to you right now, we have 8 that are out of service, 2 gone for remount. 1 was hit over the weekend on a hit and run. Fortunately, our crew was not injured, but it took it out of service, and 5 are down for mechanical. So, that leaves us 17 operational units. To reach a unit hour utilization of 0.45, we're looking at 21 trucks during the daytime and around 13 at night. So we've made some gains in our employment. Right now, we have 18 positions open with 7 in the process as far as the pipeline through HR. So hopefully those are 7 more of that 18 that will be hired in the coming weeks. There are 12 combination of EMTs and paramedics that are somewhere in the initial training process. So it's kind of like I tell my folks at EMS is, help's on the way. It's some of the things, the numbers are getting better. There's some optimism going around. That's good. That's a good thing. So back to our, that's kind of the synopsis of what's going on there. So with our ASLs, we looked at reclassifying about 10 of our 112 paramedic positions to advanced EMT. And what that is, the easiest way to explain that would probably be paramedic light. Okay, it's a credential between EMT and paramedic. It's a shorter amount of time getting somebody to it. If we're running the EMT ambulances, it makes that an advanced life support ambulance. It doesn't give it the full capabilities of a paramedic, but then we can bridge those employees from advanced EMT to paramedic in a shorter amount of time also. So it gives us options. Any way you want to put the puzzle together, it's a way to provide different options that work. The reason we approached it the way we did is right now, we don't have a classification for advanced EMT. We have EMTs and we have paramedics. Back in the day when I started, I worked here as an intermediate. We had an EMT, intermediate is what it was called back then. But they did away with the certification. They combined it into a national standard, advanced EMT, and we didn't adopt it back then. So we don't have a pay scale for it. We don't have anything for it. So what this does is actually there's a cost savings there, because obviously you're taking a salaried position, drop it to a lower salaried position, but then we want to use part of that to transform 4 of our paramedic positions to field training officers. Right now, I've got 16 employees that are in somewhere between riding third and cleared paramedic. It means they ideally need to be riding with an FTO. There's 16 of those people. We have 2 FTOs per shift. We have 8. So this is part of that same progression. As we're trying to move forward with creating the pipeline and moving forward with our recruitment and retention efforts, we've got to have that human element to help with the throughput of those employees' training. And that goes right back to the training officer. We currently have 3 training officers assigned to the EMS division. One of our goals with Forsyth Tech and with Wake Forest is to have a more active role in their education. And here again, I've got a very good training division. They're very overworked. And so that extra training officer allows us that ability. We have done EMT initial courses through Forsyth County, moderate success with that. This is something that could allow us to even maybe do a advanced EMT class, or possibly even a paramedic program in correlation with either Wake Forest or Forsyth Tech in the future. So here again, it gives us different options, different avenues to get this pipeline actually flowing, and not just, depending on who applies. It takes a more progressive and active role in it. I think that hit the key points of it, didn't it?
Yeah, talk about how many trucks, because you said to get to where we would like to be with unit hour utilization, you'd have to have 21-day, 13-night.
21, correct.
Tell them what we are right now, and then tell them how many trucks that the year 1 would add.
Okay, so let me look back on this, because I remember those exact numbers. So right now, we're it depends on the day. I mean, it's still very fluid, because we have, like I said, we have 16 currently, as of today, 16 people that are in training of some form. In the last week, we've had 3 or 4 come out of that so this is always a flowing process.
Well,
So
and
whereas
who shows up for work? Maybe the way to get to that is yesterday and last night.
all right, so a month ago,
Okay.
we were probably running 7 trucks at night. Tonight, we're scheduled to run 11 with 3 QRVs. I got some happy people over that, because they ran close to that last night, and they were still tied up 3 different occasions. Everything in the county was tied up at 3 different occasions between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. this morning.
Define an occasion. Taking someone somewhere along that tape.
So what I mean is so we had 11 trucks running, okay? So there were 12 calls at the same time.
Okay.
That's an occasion. So there was 3 different times during the night, last night, where there was not a Forsyth County ambulance to send at the point.
You use the sheriff's office with their?
No, we've got, so our private franchise providers, Lifestar and NewCare, are required to supply us a BLS truck. We utilize those. Honestly, those get utilized on the lower acuity calls normally way before we ever roll. Most of these, what ends up happening is with the QRVs go, we have supervisors respond with QRVs, and a unit gets available as soon as they can. If it's going to be a delay, we call in out-of-county resources. We utilize Stokes County, we utilize Guilford County, Davidson County, Davie, Yadkin, whoever's got something available.
Yeah, so look on your dashboard. So if you look down at the dashboard, this I believe was May, and so on average we had 12-day trucks and 9 night trucks. That's that That's that box, the square box over there under EMS call volume statistics. So that gives you some idea from May where we were. You got the number of incidents. We calculate unit hour utilization out of that. Private priority 1, so 112 times that month, we had to call the Lifestar or New Care for
Tell
that.
me when, I'm confused about this. I assume some calls take longer than others,
Yes, sir.
right? And an average call, when you say you had 112 private, is that right?
The 112 on private priority 1, that doesn't count priority 2.
What that meant was there was a priority 1 call, lights and siren, emergency call that came out. There was not an ALS ambulance available to send. So we sent a BLS truck as part of one of our private franchise providers. Now, we send a paramedic with them, a QRV, one of the supervisors, one of the QRV medics. We send one of those with them. But we're relying on that other entity to transport.
And then the green and red box over there.
Sheriff's cars, station wagons, Don. You were just with the sheriff had some cars for the station wagons that they brought here.
Those are for our mobile medical group. That's not EMS.
Yeah. Well, it's mobile integrated health through us, but it's just a different response. That's and mobile integrated health will go on these calls. Some of this.
A lot of times that's the paramedic that's responding is that group also.
How many total ambulances are there in Forsyth County, including the private?
That's a loaded question. How many, are you talking about physical ambulances or how many that are in service that have cruise room? Because, I mean, we have 25 ambulances. 2 of them are gone to get rid of.
25.
That doesn't mean I have 25 crews to run on them.
That right here. And you want to go to 28. Is that
Correct.
right? Okay, so
2 of them are always,
How many does Life, what is it?
well, Lifestar, I mean, we're talking fleet numbers, they have 20-some ambulances. But that doesn't mean they have the crews to put on. They suffer the same issues that we do. As far as their franchise agreement, they're required to provide us 1 911 truck, 24/7, 365. They provide us a second one, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Now, with Lifestar, they run probably over 100 calls in addition to that with their convalescent trucks, just because they have some capacity that they do also.
Suppose, outside the box here, can Lifestar do all of our EMS service? They bid that kind of thing where they would take over the ambulance service altogether?
They're not large enough. I mean,
Are there companies that do that?
there are.
And any of them in North Carolina?
Not to my knowledge.
You've got some odd things in North Carolina.
Yeah, there's some.
By statute, we've got to provide EMS service. There are a few hospital-based systems that get involved in it.
Have we sought that out at any one time?
No, we really haven't. It's certainly something you could, in places that have done it, like Granville, where I came from. Granville did it because they own the hospital. So it was a county-owned hospital, and it made a lot of sense to do that. And there's only one hospital system there. First Health down in Moore County is a hospital-based system with some county support. It is.
I was thinking of that coming in today because a Lifestar drove by me on the highway, flashing light.
They are an integral part of making sure that we have boots on the ground. And you can see, that probably 112 times we relied on them. We do not pay them for that service. The expectation is that, through our franchise, they can bill for convalescent transport. And so they essentially eat the cost. And on some priority calls where there's a transport, they get paid in the same manner we do.
So if they're going past me with their lights flashing, getting off at
Should be, yes. Or they could be responding to a call that was in that area. I don't know which. That would be the two scenarios.
And they bill directly to the patient.
Or their insurance, yes. And you got to realize their primary business is convalescent. They run a little over 20,000 convalescent calls a year.
Right.
Which is their primary thing. This is a very busy system. You know, the 911 side, all told, is probably around 60,000. But there's, as far as ambulance transports, you could easily add another 30,000 to that a year.
Can you check what that call would have been about? Have the ability to do that?
Yeah, what time was it?
I'm not asking you to do it.
But I mean, I'm just
the
going,
ability to
yeah,
do that.
sure.
You would know if that was a convalescent call or a.
Well, it would, I can about assure you it wasn't a convalescent call. It may have been what was dispatched as a lower acuity 911 call that they saw something.
Determine that, 911 or with you?
Our CAD system or our dispatchers with communications. And then if they find something that they feel like is out of their scope, they contact us. Depending on their location, we tell them to go into a hospital or we send them resources, ALS resources.
And there's been, I guess, 112 times last year where all 25 of our vehicles were either down or on the road.
Last
Okay,
month.
so we're not staffing 25. That's why I say when you ask me how many ambulances we have, that's our fleet. We're typically running 11 to 13 a day. That goes back to our problem.
So the
And
10 ambulances are idle.
well, or broke down or something. I mean, there's other trucks sitting there.
And they're also cleared, so they're cleared and available when they leave the hospital. And so when you say that half the time they're not doing anything, it doesn't mean they're sitting around.
Oh, no, that just means they're not tied up on
wherever
that call at that
their
moment.
station is. So unit hour utilization isn't when they get back to a destination, it's just when they're cleared, which gives you, there's gonna be a direct correlation between unit hour utilization and missed calls because they're random. And that's really the concern. The concern about unit hour utilization is not people need to be sitting around half the time. The concern about unit hour utilization is
Availability.
you don't have, statistically, you're gonna get yourself in trouble around availability.
These, our private providers, they're in the same boat we are as far as staffing. I mean, New Care and Lifestar have their challenges. That's what I did for a little over 2 years was recruit and train over there. And it's just, you do have a larger population coming out at the EMT level.
So this is a side question, had nothing to do with staffing. The fire departments were in here telling us that they have to buy new equipment because a National Association of Fire something requires them to, that some equipment is outdated after it's been used for 4 years, even though it may be perfectly.
NFPA,
You all
yes.
have the same sort of.
There are some things that are that way. I mean, obviously everything has a lifespan. But typically, I'm trying to think of anything right off the top of my head. NFPA, while it's a voluntary standard for the fire service, it's also what you're held to. I mean, so if something goes wrong, they're going to throw that right in your face. So, I mean, the department, exactly, it's all insurance related. So on the EMS side, there's very few things. I mean, we deal with expiration dates. Drugs expire, so we have to replace them if we don't use them. Trying to think, I mean, there is obviously a service life. Anything has a service life. But unlike NFPA where they said you've got to replace your turnout gear every 10 years or, an SCBA bottle's only good for 15 years and things like that, we have very few things that affect us like that.
Thank you. Thanks for what you're doing.
Could I just ask, do you believe with this funding that this would alleviate you having to call? I'll give you, if I'm having a heart attack, I really don't want y'all to call Stokes County. I love Stokes County, but I want somebody from Forsyth. Would this solve that problem?
I'm not gonna say it's gonna solve the problem, but we're moving in the right direction. You've got to understand, our request or the goal that we're getting to is really where we probably should have been a few years ago. You know, as much as I'd like to tell you that you don't hit a ceiling with calls. The more population, the more things that go on, the demands for service increase. That's something that, you know, that I'm a big proponent that we've got to address from both ends. And that's things like, part of it could be something as simple as 911 education of, you know, this is what you call for, this is what you don't. I saw some pretty good stuff on social media from another state that had showed something like that. I think that eventually we need to look in our dispatch center. There needs to be other resources. It's hard to explain if you've not been there, but what turns into an ambulance call, quite frankly, a lot of the times is not a medical emergency. Okay, somebody don't feel good, so they call for an ambulance. Well, when you really get down to it, why don't they feel good? They haven't eaten. They have poor nutrition. They have poor social conditions. So EMS historically has been the safety net of our community. When they don't know what to do, they call 911. And so a lot of what we deal with are not medical emergencies. And that's where our MIH program has been successful in trying to connect clients to resources and things like that. And really, you know, we have some, as we've termed super users, that we see a lot, that's where they've tried to focus, is the people that call 20, 30 times a month, just about daily, and get that number down, because that makes a significant impact. But the problems that we get called for through 911, unfortunately, most of the time are not what 911 was intended for. And it's a side effect of everything else in society. And so we have to get to the point where we need to connect them to a resource, but we don't need to send them an ambulance, because it's just like building bigger emergency rooms. We can build bigger emergency rooms. Forsyth and Baptist can build one as big as the hospital. Guess what? It's still going to fill up. It's still going to fill up. So we've got to incentivize people to reach out to the appropriate resources: downtown health plaza, social services, public health, things that are cost effective and make sense.
And what are the roles of the fire departments and being first responder part?
So
where does that fit into this mix?
So in cases of emergencies, okay, in those cases of somebody's having a heart attack, somebody's having an overdose, somebody's been shot, it purely comes back to time. The county fire departments and city fire departments in Winston-Salem are set upon distance and time. Okay, so Walkertown, for example, is a place I'm intimately familiar with, is able to be at pretty much all areas of their district in less than 5 minutes. Okay, if I've got a 90th percentile response time of 18 minutes, there's your difference. And so you're getting somebody there for the life-threatening emergencies in that short amount of time. The reality, cardiac arrest, BLS is what makes the big difference. Somebody that gets there with a defibrillator, somebody that gets there and performs CPR, the ALS gets there and keeps them alive. It makes their outcome better. But they're going to live or die with the BLS and a cardiac arrest. So that's where those first responders are paramount to us. During COVID, we really looked at response to try to eliminate. We didn't want to expose anybody we didn't have to. So we really limited first responder response down to what we truly felt that we needed them. And we've been able to hold some of those over so we don't send them unless we have to. But we do give our dispatchers the autonomy to, this doesn't sound right, let's send them. Or there's a delay in our response time because we're tied up and now we're coming from Forsyth Hospital going to Blues Creek. Let's go ahead and send the fire department. Get somebody there, get some eyes on the patient, make sure they're okay until we get there.
So you believe that this recommendation, we get your unit hour utilization down into that 0.45?
It's going to move it in the right direction. The unknown parts, obviously, the parts that I truly own of this is changing our environment. we got to hold on to the people we've got. There's nothing replaces experience. And so when I have a 5-year employee or a 10-year employee leave and I get a 2-day employee, that's not an even trade. So, if we can make enough changes internally, make the work environment, some of the things that this board did in the past year with salary increases and some incentives for education made a difference. Those things made a difference. A few years ago when we made the changes to the pay scale for FTOs, that made a difference. We got to work on the environment. And we changed the environment enough that they know we're doing some things. That allows our hiring, our recruitment, and training to catch up. Then we gain some ground. And when you gain some ground, the overall mood changes. And it keeps your employees there. We've got competitors. And we always thought our competitors were Guilford County and Stokes County and Surrey County. Our competitors are Novant, Wake Forest, every doctor's office in this county. That's who our true competitors are, because they can go there, make more money, work a whole lot less. So the scope of practice for a paramedic has changed tremendously in the last 2 years.
The other thing that happened from a staffing perspective and how this got on our radar screen is really pre-COVID. In the months before pre-COVID, our unit hour utilization, we really saw it start to peak then, and it was an issue. When COVID hit and everybody went home, for a period of time, our call volume went way down and our unit hour utilization got manageable, and it was a breather. As we started coming up out of it, particularly last summer and last fall, when folks started doing stuff, that's when call volume really got up there and hadn't been under, 4,000 was the number of calls. I mean, 4,000 a month was what we weren't dropping into the threes like we had been, and it stayed there. And this was a problem that's a pretty old problem. We were just starting to get in the mix of it, and we're really developing some solutions. Had a little bit of a break and probably got caught unawares a little bit. And but I don't see the call volume going down. I think the population's caught up with us. We've done all the things we can do around having a QRV and some trucks like that. At this point, this is a capacity fix. I hope the year one fix adjusted enough, and maybe we don't have to do. If you notice, this is a 2-year window and pathway to get us to a better unit hour utilization. We're not going to automatically come back to you, frankly, with the year 2, because it's going to take us about 6 months of this year to try to get these positions staffed up to see where we are. So, but the goal is to try to get a unit hour utilization under control.
The thing I'm most optimistic with is, as busy as our folks are, when we look at some of the measures that are out there, if you just look at cardiac arrest, we use the same model. For far as reporting, is a national model. And if you look, I'm kind of let's look at the true meat of it. And the true meat of it is, if you have a cardiac arrest, you want to be functional, right? You want to have good neurological outcome. And if you look at cardiac arrest data for the past year in Forsyth County, and you look at all causes but survival with good neurological outcome, the national average for the United States is 9%. The state average of North Carolina is 9%. Forsyth County is 18.2. And that's with their butts getting kicked. So that's what I'm optimistic about, is our folks are getting the job done. We just need to get them a little less busy and keep them here. And that's how we get to it.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, out of all the budget, for me, this one is my top priority. We provide so many services in Forsyth County, but this is a service that no matter where you live, no matter who you are, if you are having a heart attack or whatever, and you call 911, you want somebody there as quickly as possible. So this is my #1 priority. And thank you for what you're doing. That's impressive.
Yeah, I'll add my thanks and just, and as a quick question, I don't see in this list the cost of the 2 ambulances and equipment, because that's kind of a, I know there's replacement and whatever, but that's kind of a one-time, that cost won't repeat next year.
So it's $680,000 for the 2 ambulances fully equipped.
680,000 for the.
That's included in that total. Yes, sir, it's included in the total, but $680,000 for the 2 ambulances.
Okay.
So another 600,000.
No, it's already included in the total. So it's, the
Oh, the
total is gonna be
1.2.
personnel and ambulances.
So it's 600 and some for the ambulance and then 600 and some for the.
Correct, for personnel, yes, sir.
Right.
And that takes you, where does that take you to?
As far as,
Projected unit hour utilization.
Better services,
okay,
how
so,
far down the line, because if we doubled that, would that take you there quicker?
no, because the reality is we're still fixing the pipeline. And until the pipeline is fixed, you know, you can give me 100 positions, it doesn't mean I'm gonna get them filled in a year. So I think it's a realistic, you have to be real, it's a realistic goal, you know, to get done. And a lot of that banks on keeping, you know, you're always gonna have turnover. People go into nursing, they go to PA school, medical school. You know, I just don't like losing them to other services. That's what I don't wanna lose. The other careers, I get it. That's good. Good luck to them. But I don't like losing them to other services that are doing the same thing that we're doing.
I'm glad you came out of retirement.
Jury's still out, but I'm enjoying it so far.
Mr. County Manager, it's high noon. What do you want to do?
So,
Take a break.
we can pick back up. This was the one that was probably the most complicated of the alternate service level requests. The rest of them are pretty straightforward. You've seen them. Neighborhood Equity Atlas, Chantel can mention that real quickly, and maybe the first floor build out of DSS. For SciTech Campus Security, I'm recommending 3 additional officers. Trad Park Greenway, that's our portion of some cost, basically to get that project moved forward, and that's the Greenway that would ultimately connect downtown Winston with downtown Greensboro. Marketing and recruitment for HR, you heard a little bit from Shannon in the detailed session, so I don't know that we need to get into any detail. We're recommending extending the contract for legislative services. That's been pretty effective, I believe, but we will know better as the General Assembly wraps up. Citizen survey we talked about. The internship we talked about at a recent meeting, and we've talked about a number of times. And so you can see where those numbers fall. Let me just get Chantel to talk about public health and DSS, and then when we come back from lunch, it really is your meeting to start putting together what your thoughts are about this. So turn it over real quick, Chantel.
Thank you, Dudley. So the Neighborhood Equity Atlas, essentially that would be a study to be able to analyze the data that we already have. So Map for Scythe has tons of data. They've done tons of work on the distressed area. There's a lot of work done with public health and the community health assessment, social determinants of health, and all of that. And so what this would do would be to study to, one, see has there been any progress made in any of these areas, because we always hear all of the negative stories. So I'd love to see if there's any positives. And then also if there are still areas of opportunities. And why this is really important is for me as the Health and Human Services Director, I'm really trying to lead the staff to make better informed decisions. So when we talk about the various programs that we have to have a better understanding of, are those programs successful? If they're not, what are some programs that we really need to be doing to actually move the needle in the community? There's a lot of nonprofits in the area. Are those nonprofits actually serving, the community where they need to be serving? Are those areas successful? So I think it would also be helpful as the board makes decisions in the future as well to have a better understanding of what success looks like, one, for the department's programs, but also some of the nonprofits. And so we're going to try to really do a really good analysis of the data. And we're interested in utilizing Winston-Salem State's Spatial Justice Studio that is with Dr. Russell Smith. He has a team of fellows and students as well as himself itself that is really interested in doing this analysis for us. So that's what this program, that Equity Atlas would be. And for DSS, the first.
Can I ask you one quick question on that?
Sure.
But, I mean, a lot of that, some of what you describe is exactly what Forsyth Futures does. I mean, that's kind of part of their business and their whatever. I mean, is there some kind of way to kind of work with them or contract with them to do some of this work?
So we could certainly look at Forsyth Futures or Spatial Justice Studio. I'd be interested to see what, both would possibly do. In full transparency, I'm a board member of Forsyth Futures. They have staffing challenges. They have capacity challenges. That's not to say that they cannot do it, but certainly we could open it up and get a proposal from both Forsyth Futures and Spatial Justice Studio.
Yeah, I mean, it's important work, but that's what I thought they were partly kind of have the capacity and created to do.
I think that there are various organizations in the community, Forsyth Future, Spatial Justice Studio, as well as, I'm blanking on the name, but the other individual at Winston-Salem State. But we have had some conversations with Dr. Russell Smith and his team in regards to this particular project, but we're happy to do the same with Forsyth Futures as well.
Could I ask you one question, please, Chantel? Didn't we just contract Forsyth Futures for our gang assessment study?
We have.
I was not satisfied with that at all. I'm just being very frank right now. Another comment and discussion. Please continue.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you just say it was not very successful?
I was not satisfied with it.
Okay, all right.
We could talk about that more offline, Commissioner Elamine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. I was not aware of that. I have it, but I have not had a chance to really review it thoroughly yet myself. So for DSS, the first floor build out, this would be essentially, they have some unfinished space. And so as you know, DSS has worked hard to really do a lot of electronic scanning of their files. They've been doing that successfully over the last few years. Special thank you to Liz White and Shanisha Jackson and their team for really pulling that together. But that also has provided a lot of additional space, unfinished space. And as we've gone through COVID, we have certainly seen the challenges of really making sure we're able to socially distance staff. This build out would also allow us to do a better job at really serving the customers that come in. So having more options on the first floor so that individuals are not having to go to 5 different floors for 5 different services. And so we would be able to really try to, you get kind of one-stop shop on the first floor in order to serve the clients that we have there. And so we do think we could utilize COVID reserve funds that the board had set aside of $300,000 because ultimately it really is, it's all correlated to making sure that it's a safe environment. We've done plexiglasses. This would allow us to do more socially distanced, but an added benefit would be it really would serve the community in a better way.
And the last thing I would say, as we leave and head to a break, you've got the alternate service level request, the updated form. On the second page, you can see where there are color-coded lines here. And what this is Kyle challenged his staff with looking at each proposal and trying to make some determination if they would be ARP eligible. Kyle, tell us what the colors mean, because there was some agreement. Some people said, one analyst said it. And,
yeah, it's so really what it is. If it's highlighted in green, that's where at least actually at least 3 of us, 3 people said yes. That's that they thought that could be eligible. If it's yellow, it's 2. If it's blue, it's 1. So it's at least 3 for the green, 2 if it's yellow, and 1 if it's blue. That's what it is.
And if you remember the guidance said that, all right, counties, when y'all get ready to want to fund something, you've got to be able to write up with a straight face that this is COVID related. That's exactly what the rules said, something to that effect. And so, this is where that's, I don't want to, there may be other items on here that you can argue would be COVID related, and we are absolutely willing and able to do that. And really depends to some extent on what statements you make as a board about whether it's COVID-related and draw that connection. If you think about it, ultimately, when we start funding this stuff with COVID money, you know, an elected body is really the body that says from a policy perspective, we believe these are eligible COVID expenses. And so there may be others here, but we have tried to give this to you in this format, so.
And COVID related, can it also not be things that will help get us out of the, for example, that are job related, job training issues, those kind of things that are gonna help get people who have been laid off and unemployed back in the workforce? Is that's a,
Yes.
kind of a COVID related issue? I mean, I just looked at the yellow one down there, the YMCA Reach Center, which basically that money is to kind of get it operational, but the plan is to take it to classrooms, training stuff, to get to, and it's in one of the eligible census tracts.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at it, that, you know, that looks like that kind of fits. And I see you only got a 2. It's only a yellow.
Well,
You
yeah, I mean, again, you know, you gotta make that case, and we probably asked our great staff to say, is it clearly eligible? And so that's probably the answer you got. We probably could have said, I mean, maybe the question would have been, can you make a case for it? And that you probably would have gotten a slightly different answer. But again, it's just, I don't know, I probably need to turn it over to Gordon. Gordon's probably looked at the rules more than anybody else.
Yeah, it depends on what they're asking for, too. So, Dr. Martin, you are correct that, you know, loans or grants can be used to mitigate financial hardship, such as declines in revenue or impact from COVID. So I'm not sure exactly what all these folks asked for, but it's not as easy. It's not as easy to answer right off the bat.
And it may be you need to, you know, if you want to fund a project with ARP money, it may be important for the folks asking for money to really tie it back into it. I mean, there'll be some give and take, I think, in that arena. So anyway.
Oh, Dudley, am I confirming that this list that's color-coded has been looked at relative to the census tract as well?
We did. I mean, I know that I did. I'm pretty sure other staff did as well. I think there might have been a few where we had a question about it but we can definitely confirm that one.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's pretty much what we had in follow-up to our detailed work session and our public hearing, and then obviously today. So with that, I'm probably ready to take a lunch break. When we come back, budget staff will be available during lunch if you need them. I'll be available, Chantel Damon, other staff, if you have any questions. As y'all start pulling together and thinking about your priorities, you probably can use, Kyle, do you have a form that they can add some stuff as they think through that? We'll get you some blank lines and really build off this, if that's okay. But clearly, if you have disagreements about anything that the management staff's recommending, obviously don't put it on your agreement, on your list. If you want it to really be more driven by you, obviously put it on, you can ignore my recommendation.
But we are definitely coming back tomorrow for the school presentation.
We are definitely coming back tomorrow for the school.
Could we do some of the, I just learned today, talking to Kyle, that, because one of the things, when I read through each of these alternative service requests, I mean, I put questions like, are there any partners? I mean, who else is involved in this? And a lot of that information is in the application. And I just learned that that's on some document file that I could have gotten to, but I didn't know I could get to it. So I'd kind of like to look at some of those before getting down to a final list of these alternate service requests. And if we're coming back tomorrow, seems like we could do that.
Are we back in here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock?
We are scheduled to be back in here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Why don't we take a break now until 1:30 for lunch? Okay.
Schools all day. Just in the morning.
Well, he'll probably